Chapter 1745. There were two things that were publicly acknowledged in the Void frontline: conditions. The conditions to declare the end of the war. Probably because we and the others have been nagging about it. Everyone in the Void frontline knew about it. One of them was naturally Yin Nuashing ascending to the Premier Realm. As long as he ascended to that realm, with the help of the 196 types of origin energy that he had complete control over, he could directly crush the underworld into a flat piece of cake. The world of order would win a great victory. Congratulations, congratulations. The second condition was more difficult than the first one. For example, a heavenly god of origin would descend from the sky. All right, this was just a joke. An unrealistic, whimsical idea, a daydream. Other than these two straightforward conditions, there were other normal ways. For example, more than 1,000 people ascending to the Premier Realm. This way, they would have the power to fight the underworld head-on without being at a disadvantage. Perhaps they would not be at a disadvantage. But what if the underworld had a peak premier? They did not even dare to think about it. If there really was one, they could only accept their fate. There was nothing they could do about it. But they had been fighting for such a long time. The entire world of order had been in an abyss of suffering for more than 10 years. How could they give up so easily? And then give up the entire world of order? Dream on. At that final moment, even if they had to destroy all the life of order and destroy the entire void of order, they would not let the underworld have an easy time. This was the common thought of everyone in the void frontline. At first, it should have just been a crazy obsession of the observer. No one knew when it became engraved in everyone's hearts. It was a thought that belonged to the last line of defense. TSK, it was said that they could not do it. But the observer could. When the time came, they could all go to the road of reincarnation to report to the underworld together. They would walk hand in hand, and all the living beings would be friends. Thinking about it, that scene should be quite lively. It was just that they did not know if the special rules of the road of reincarnation and the underworld could accommodate so many people at once. If the underworld was overcrowded, the administrator would probably go berserk, right? That scene was not common. As for why they suddenly thought of this, phew, it was just thinking about the consequences of some big and small matters. Some consequences that they could not help but think about. Excited? That's the territory of the Netherworld realm, but I can't say that I'm excited. After all these years, Lord Green turned around and looked at the endless void. Seeing those manifestations and structures coming and going, his face turned green, and he retched at the city wall. I fought to the point where I feel like vomiting when I see them. Ugh. In the middle of the 56th era, time was still unknown. The matters of the world were still moving forward, and the void had never been peaceful. Lord Green stood on the city wall and looked at the battlefield. The forces of order and chaos were fighting back and forth. Even though it was a small battlefield in such a spacious area, he had already seen the process of every fight. It came and went repeatedly. Yes, he was not slacking off. As the power of the world of order continued to grow, this battlefield had also returned to its slightly relaxed state from a few eras ago. It was no longer like the past few eras where everyone had to squeeze their own strength and constantly charge forward to maintain the balance of the situation. The power of order was growing. On the other hand, on the side of the Netherworld realm, well, their power, manifestations, structures, and so on seemed to have not changed for a very long time. No one knew if this path had come to an end, or if they did not have more energy to deal with it. No matter what, for the front line of the void, as long as a portion of people had free time, they would have many opportunities to rapidly grow their power. Check. Well, the production speed of the special energy towers is still a little slow. It was rare that Lord Green did not stand on the front line and rush through the void. At this moment, he was nestled on the city wall and communicating with his subordinates about the situation of the Node City. This part of the preparation has to be sped up. Let some people. Forget it. I'll go and help personally. The matter of guarding the front line can be left to that guy. That guy. This Yuan-Shur tier order warrior scratched his head blankly. After thinking for a while, he finally understood. Then he cupped his hands and said, "Oh, you're talking about the deputy commander. I'll go and inform him now." After sending off the warrior, Lord Green continued to look at the crystal ball in his hand. The dense information turned into thousands of strands of energy that flowed freely in the crystal ball. He casually picked out a piece of information and looked at it for a moment. Then he could not help but murmur, Lord Maple and Lord Hui have already started preparing an era in advance. Such a long preparation time. World-like clusters? Those that have been destroyed or have reached the age and the world core. Well, the law entanglement points. Why is Lord Maple looking for these? Forget it. Lord Maple must have his own ideas. There are also many abandoned world-like clusters in the void here. The world core and the law entanglement points can only be dealt with now. Hey you, tidy up all the abandoned worlds that were tidied up in the void last time and send them to Node 0. There will be someone there to help receive them. An order warrior standing on the city wall cupped his hands, turned around, and disappeared in a flash of light. Also, get someone else to... Lord Green was startled. The world core and the law entanglement points, these two things had a huge impact on the source world, especially the world core. If this thing was gone, it would be out of balance in minutes. Then, with a bang, it would ignite fireworks. Make man-made ones. He did not know if the talisman met the requirements, but it should not be a problem. Since it was not mentioned, it should not be a problem. After sorting out his thoughts, he looked at the order warrior in front of him and waved his hand. Go to the logistics department and ask them to prepare some world cores when they are free. Then, go to the void and find the law entanglement points of each world. Try your best not to affect the balance of those worlds and bring them back. The unlucky order warrior listened in a daze and walked into the node city in a daze. At this moment, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. The existence of the law entanglement points did not have a huge impact on the source world, but packing them up and taking them away would still have some impact on the concept layer of the world's laws. If he wanted to not affect it as much as possible, he could only deal with the aftermath while dismantling them. Special energy towers. Well, new origin energy runes, small magic circles, small charms, all with origin energy. After sending off the two order warriors, Lord Green continued to stare at the energy ball. After a while, he put his hands on his waist and sighed. It seems that before going to war, I need to change all the military forces of my people to models with origin energy as the base. No wonder it took an era, or even more time to prepare. As for what came after, there was more information recorded in the crystal ball. It would take a very long time for the arrangements to be made. It would take an era to rectify the entire void front line. Lord Green thought about what had just happened and felt that it was still a little inappropriate. He quickly found Lord Huey's soul seed. Lord Huey, what kind of strength do you need for the world cores that Lord Phone wants? An ordinary origin world's world core? Or do you want to make one yourself? Both are fine, as long as you maintain a stable enough strength. The quality is not a problem. Quantity, the more the better. Lord Huey's voice rushed into the soul transmission in the next second. It sounded hurried. Obviously, the other side was busy. After hurriedly responding to him, he hung up and ignored him. He also heard a lot of noise coming from inside. It might be that thousands of soul transmissions were opened at once, and the sounds were all clashing together. Lord Green listened for a while and felt that there was nothing to interrupt for the time being, so he closed the soul transmission and let out a long sigh of relief. Such a large number of preparations and the mobilization of the entire void front line seemed to have nothing to do with the arrangements of the front line itself. In that case, there was only one use. The 56th era. Phew, it seems that it's not too far away. Time has slowly pushed all this to us, forcing us to make a choice, but it's also holding a knife to our necks. To what extent do you want us to do? Lord Green sighed and squeezed his hands. He looked up at the void and muttered to himself, can we reach the peak of the middle level of the premiere before that day? If we can step into the high level of the premiere, is there no need for Lord Phone to take such a step? Node 0. While everyone in the void front line was in an uproar, Node 0 was the busiest place at the moment. It was the core of the void front line and gathered the highest level of power in the void front line. At this moment, It was busy because more than 1,000 nodes were busy transporting the things that the observer needed from various places in the void. They moved without stopping and without delay, although most people did not know what the observer wanted these seemingly useless things for. The observer space. At this moment, the observer space had been submerged in endless energy. All the energy in the void was converging toward this space. At a glance, it was full of flowing lights and vibrant colors, filling all the colors in the world. Looking carefully, in this sea of energy, there were hundreds of light clusters floating in it. A figure stood at the top of the entire sea of energy. His gorgeous eyes stared across space at the void, seemingly vigilant and observing something. Lord Foam. There were sparkling ripples in the sea of energy. Jing Yuanji appeared beside the figure, accompanied by a weak spatial flow. She turned her head to look at the latter and said respectfully, "This is a new batch of world-like clusters, and, should we deal with them in the same way? Well, throw them down." Yin Nuoxing nodded gently. Jing Yuanji received a response and raised her hand gently. Thousands of spatial vortexes appeared beside her, facing down towards the sea of energy below. The internal space suddenly opened up, and countless balls of light, balls of yarn entwined with light, as well as irregular structures with abnormal energy movements appeared. All of them plunged into the sea of energy, producing a series of gurgling sounds as they were swept up by the undercurrents of the sea of energy and brought to various places. After throwing the world-like clusters, the heart of the world, and the entangled points of the rules into the sea of energy, Jing Yuanji turned her head to look at Lord Feng. "Are you still vigilant of that person?" "I had nothing to do, so I took a look." Yin Nuoxing nodded. The one she was referring to was the primeval god of the underworld who had led the manifestations and constructs in the battle against the void frontline. However, that primeval had disappeared for almost half an era, and there were only manifestations, constructs, and fledglings left in the void frontline, with the strongest being a mid-tier primeval fledglings. Those high-tier primeval underworld beings had already left the battlefield, and no one knew what they were up to. With the high-tier primeval gone, the manifestations and constructs' offensive power returned to the state they were in several years ago. Thus, they gained a lot of breathing time and could use the extra time to make preparations they had to do. For example, the void frontline was currently in a state of bustle, and it was because of this time that they could do what they wanted to do. However, although the primeval god of the underworld had left, they still had to be vigilant. If they let their guard down a little, what if the primeval god of the underworld had brought troops to attack them? Jing Yuanji, who had been standing beside him in a daze for a while, quickly regained her senses. "Lord Feng, what are your orders?" Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at her light blue eyes. There was no sadness or joy on her face, but a completely frozen expression. After a while, she slowly said, "If I give you another era, can you reach the high-tier primeval god of the underworld?" Jing Yuanji was stunned. Mei Mao blinked for a moment, shook her head, and suddenly said, "But if you must." Yin Nuoxing flicked her finger on the girl's forehead and looked away. "If you can do it, then do it naturally. If you can't, then go in that direction for the time being. There's no need to force yourself to achieve that goal. After all, things in this world often go against your wishes." "How are Jing Yun, Sui Feng, and the others?" Jing Yun is still in the Temple of Origin, and Sui Qing, Sui Feng, and the others seem to want to reach the high-tier primeval god of the underworld as soon as possible. They have not come out for thousands of years. Jing Yuanji said softly, rubbing her forehead. "You have pushed yourself too hard." Yin Nuoxing sighed deeply. "Even so, that realm is not something you can enter as you wish. The general momentum of the void, the strength of the void's limit, is there. If you want to reach the high-tier primeval god of the void by force." "Phew! Isn't it because you have been nagging us to reach the high-tier primeval god of the underworld? Naturally, we have to risk our lives to find a way. A cheerful voice that was accompanied by bright sunlight suddenly rang over the sea of energy, startling both of them. They turned and saw the white-robed Lord Guardian walking over the waves of energy with a cheeky smile on his face. We also have our own battlefields where we have to risk our lives. We can't just let you risk your life all the time, can we? Oh, you. Don't be so conflicted about whether you are willing or not. Aren't you conflicted about reaching the high-tier primeval god of the underworld? You are clearly stuck at the high-tier primeval god of the underworld, but you are conflicted about not wanting us to risk our lives. We kept poking Maple's forehead as he said, "There is no need to talk about this. We will do our best to reach the high-tier primeval god of the underworld. Maple, you just have to worry about your own things." Yin Nuashing was silent for a moment before nodding. "But what do you want so many worlds and those things for?" We looked at the vast sea of energy below and couldn't help but poke Yin Nuashing with his elbow. "Tell me honestly, are you going to do something special?" "Special stuff. Naturally, it needs to be something special to be useful." Yin Nuashing crossed her arms in front of her abdomen. "As for what I am doing, can't you tell what I am doing?" "I can tell. I can probably tell a little." Hui grinned. "But I am too lazy to speculate. I want you to say it yourself." Yin Nuashing was speechless as she glared at him. She said flatly, "Quantity. Quantity changes. Qualitative changes. That's it." You might as well not have said anything. You've collected so many world lights and those other things. Who doesn't know that you intend to use them to build a Tower of Babel to deal with those things? But will it really work?" Huey's voice became serious as he spoke. The imaginary enemies were all high-tier primeval gods. This was also the reason why Maple wanted them to reach the high-tier primeval god of the underworld. To deal with enemies of this level, using quantity, well, since he reached the mid-tier primeval god of the underworld, he had been thinking about this. Based on what he had seen, it should be difficult to achieve the goal. But Maple, well, he might be able to do it. "I'm not sure. This is the only thing I can do." Yin Nuashing sighed. "I am just a weak, pitiful, and helpless primeval god of the underworld." Hui and Jing Yuanji smiled bitterly at the same time. Weak, pitiful, and helpless? None of these words had anything to do with the person in front of them. This guy could crush the void of Order 5 eras ago. Even if 5 eras had passed, he still seemed to be a primeval god of the underworld without any change. But if someone really said that he had not changed in these 5 eras, they would not believe it even if they were beaten to death. It was just that the path he was going to take was destined to be very remote. Jing Yuanji pinched her pretty face and suddenly blinked. "Lord Maple, there are guests coming to Node 0. Guest. Hui trembled violently. The last time he heard these 2 words was 5 eras ago. There was no news of that group of troublemakers after that. It could not have been 5 eras. Jing Yuanji saw that Lord Hui was sweating nervously. He kept winking at her where Lord Maple could not see, which made her a little confused. She knew that Lord Hui seemed to be very nervous about the word guest this time, but she did not know the reason. After thinking for a while, she said directly, "Siyu and Qing Huang are already waiting there. They said that an old friend is coming." "Old friend?" Yin Nuashing, who was always calm, and Hui, who was sweating all over, were startled. The two looked at each other and said in unison, "Old friend at this time? Weren't all his old friends at the Void front line?" Everyone he knew from the Cloud Continent was also here. Jing Yuanji shrugged. "They said it's a secret and only told me to tell you. If you have time, you will understand. If not, just pretend that they didn't say anything." Yin Nuashing and Hui looked at each other. The former thought for a while and nodded. "Then let's go. There is observer space here. I don't need to stay here all the time." In the hall of the City Hall of Zero City, Siyu and Feng Qing Huang were sitting on the sofa. Across the table from them sat a little girl who looked about 12 years old. She had long grayish-blue hair and was wearing simple clothes from an unknown world. She looked a little travel-worn, and there were all kinds of strange auras around her. It seemed that she had come here from somewhere incredible. When the door to the hall was pushed open, Siyu and Blue Phoenix hurriedly raised their heads and looked at Yin Nuashing, who was walking at the front. After thinking about it, they restrained themselves. Meanwhile, the little girl sitting on the sofa opposite them suddenly jumped up. Heavenly God of Origin? The little girl with long grayish-blue hair suddenly turned around and was startled. Why are you here? Why did your aura become? Oh, this? Yin Nuashing and the other two were startled. Yin Nuashing and Hui looked at each other. This little girl's appearance was a little familiar. This little girl's appearance. They seemed a little familiar. The little girl with long grayish-blue hair saw them frowning and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Did the past 5 eras make you stupid? Do you need me to remind you? Like an altar or something. Ahem, I remember now. Yin Nuashing coughed and waved her hand. I just remembered, but you didn't have a code name, so it was a little difficult to recall. The three of them sat down beside Siyu and Qing Huang. Yin Nuashing said, "You left for many years. Have you made any progress?" Hearing this, the little girl sighed and shook her head. I've circled the entire Yuan realm tens of thousands of times, but I haven't been able to find any trace of it. Hui smiled bitterly. I don't know if this is good news or bad news. Speaking of which, that thing really likes to wander around the void, and it leaves a little tail wherever it goes. The little girl smiled bitterly and pulled her hair. She quickly waved her hand. Let's not talk about this. This time, I'm here to good news or bad news. Yin Nuashing coughed and spoke first. I don't know what kind of news it is. The little girl smiled bitterly, took a sip of tea, and said, I just came back from the 5 Elements realm. In the void over there, there seems to be a group of powerful people of unknown origin. Yin Nuashing and Hui slapped their faces at the same time. Their hearts were full of bitterness. It's here, it's here. After waiting for so many years, it's finally here. That group of shameless people finally made a move on the lower elemental realm. After being defeated in the 8 Elements realm for so many years, they finally set their sights on the lower elemental realm. They really made a move? Maybe they're just scouting? Currently, there are no signs of war or destruction. Unknown, powerful people frequently appear in the void. And it's not just the 5 Elements realm. There are also some unknown figures in the 3, 4, and 6 Elements realms. The overly powerful laws and order have slightly interfered with the gods guarding the void. But I've already reminded the altars in the various elemental realms that they will make contact with the gods. The little girl shook her legs gently. The heavenly god of Origin's protection that you've reactivated has suppressed their power. In theory, it shouldn't be as dangerous as you think. She saw the few people in the hall hanging their heads and sighing bitterly. She quickly said, I know that you guys are also very busy here. I'm not here to disturb you guys. I just feel that there may be some things that I need to tell you guys. The situation in the lower elemental realm may not be as serious as here, so there's no need to worry for the time being. That's what you said. Hui looked up with a speechless face. This topic itself is worrying us. Phew, you really don't need our help? The little girl scratched her head and laughed dryly. She laughed like a completely unreliable guardian. Chapter 1746. Lower Primordial Realm. Lower Primordial Realm. This topic was mentioned a long time ago. At that time, they were still guessing what the underworld wanted to do by overturning the entire 8 Primordial Realm. Then, they met this seemingly unreliable guardian of the altar. Their subsequent guesses were more or less clear, but at that time, guesses were just guesses. There was no way to verify or know the truth. At this moment, since she said that she had seen figures that were suspected to be from the underworld in the lower elemental realm, powerful creatures that were definitely not locals anyway, then many things were more or less clear. The underworld was what they wanted to do and what they wanted to obtain. After going back and forth between the 8 Primordial Realm and the Order Void for 16 eras, they probably still hadn't touched the core of the 8 Primordial Realm. Finally, those things that couldn't hold back finally stretched their stinky claws to the lower Primordial Realm and were about to stir up a storm in the lower Primordial Realm. But it's also possible that their plan has come to an end, so they need to speed up. Since they can't touch the core of the 8 Primordial Realm, they can only find a few substitutes or something. Yin Nuashing opened her mouth to respond to Huey's long speech. Hui was silent. That was indeed very likely. Well, let's put this aside for now. In any case, their claws must have reached the lower primordial realm now. Yin Nuashing turned to look at the little girl. By the way, when did those people from the underworld appear in the lower primordial realm? This question is too difficult. The little girl smiled bitterly. It's just that I've recently discovered some life forms that don't belong to the elemental realm in the void over there. If you want to ask me specifically when they appeared, I've asked the alter guardian consciousness of the 5 elemental realms, and it replied recently. Recently for hundreds of millions of years, right? We couldn't help but smile bitterly. The group of people in the hall couldn't help but smile bitterly. In any case, the concept of time had become extremely vague to them. For them, the concept of time had become even more vague recently. For them, it was just a short period of time. It wasn't a problem at all. Yin Nuashing covered her face and sighed. It's better to make some preparations in advance. We don't know how much power the protection of the origin heavenly God can suppress from the 8 primordial realm. If something goes wrong, well, we can't afford to gamble on this. Are you going to the lower primordial realm? Hui tapped his forehead with a headache. At this moment, the void front line was fully prepared for the upcoming battle. If they suddenly left, phew, just sending people down was definitely not enough. The two of them might have to go down personally to make some preparations, such as adjusting the protection of the origin heavenly God or something. As for participating in the war that might break out in the lower primordial realm, forget it. They were really understaffed. They couldn't be in 2 places at the moment. Humans could only save themselves. Amitba, what the hell are you doing? Seeing Hui putting his palms together and chanting the Buddha's name, Yin Nuashing was also stunned for a moment. After a moment, she turned her head and ignored this weird guy. She looked at the little girl and asked, "Have you already informed the guardian consciousness of the core of the primordial realm? When I discovered the abnormal life form, I went to inform them. I also knew that this was a serious matter, so I didn't delay." The little girl shrugged. But whether or not the lower primordial realm can form a force to resist and stop the invasion of the underworld, this question is really hard to say. See, you couldn't help but mutter, "I think that if the abyssal death mist pushes across, it might be gone." This is really possible. With the special nature of the abyssal death mist, even if the people of the underworld don't come down personally, they only need to throw a bunch of derivations and the abyssal death mist down, and the lower primordial realm's world of order will be destroyed in a matter of minutes. After all, the other primordial realms were not like the 8 primordial realms. The life forms in the worlds of order did not know much about the concepts of order, chaos, void, rules, and so on. Especially the first 3. The 6th and 7th primordial realms might be fine, but the 5 primordial realms below were really completely unclear. The only ones who knew about these in the entire void might be not more than 1% of the life forms. That's right, the total number of life forms in the entire void. The little girl said solemnly, that 1% also includes the celestials of the various primordial realms, the guardian race of the primordial realms. As for the rules, this was very messy and entangled. The rules of every world were different, and there would be differences in individual cognition and the definition of the existence of the world itself. As long as they did not approach and unify the macroscopic void rules, the so-called Great Tao that one knew of, or other things, only applied in one's own world. So this thing could actually be put aside. What's the origin of those celestials? They seem to have always existed. We felt a little curious. When he heard about the celestials, he felt that it was related to the heavenly God of origin. It's just a kind of observation rules that exists in the void itself. It's a concept. If you want to treat it as a self-protection mechanism in a life form, it's more or less the same. There are life forms that are appointed by the void. They exist with the void and only think and act for the sake of order and the void. Due to their superior status, they are... The little girl tilted her head and looked at Yin Nuashing. Similar to you, they are observers. The celestials are the fairest in the entire void, the fairest and most just order. Yin Nuashing tugged at her hair and suddenly said, "Since you mentioned order, does that mean that the other primordial realms also have the existence of the chaotic void?" Of course. The little girl couldn't help but raise her voice a little. In the entire great primordial realm, the war between order and chaos is eternal. It's just that the war between order and chaos in the other primordial realms added together is not as fierce as the war in the entire 8 primordial realms. This is based on the relative extent of each primordial realm. The war between the first primordial realm and the 7 primordial realms added together has never been expanded to the size of more than 100 conventional void regions. But the 8 primordial realms, the little girl immediately fell silent. Yin Nuashing and the others smiled bitterly. The war between order and chaos in the 8 primordial realms had already turned the entire 8 primordial realms into a battlefield. There's no need to mention it anymore. After smiling bitterly, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but ponder. It seems that when the heavenly god of origin and the others slapped the great primordial realm into 8 parts, they also split the void of order and the chaotic void into 8 parts. Otherwise, there's no way for the void of order to evolve. At first, he thought that the chaotic void only existed in the 8 primordial realms. Ah, I remember something. Yin Nuashing suddenly looked at the little girl. Was there only one core of the primordial realms in the beginning? The little girl was startled. 8 primordial realms. 8. Oh, it seems that you don't know. What I mean is, Yin Nuashing took a deep breath. After thinking for a while, he directly threw the information about the chaotic void to the little girl. Obviously, she was stunned. It seemed that the information about the great primordial realm being split into 8 parts was something that even someone like her, someone like her who was related to the void, might not know. After about 5 minutes, the little girl blinked her grayish-blue eyes and shuddered. Wow, that's amazing. So such a thing actually happened? It seems that you really don't know. Yin Nuashing frowned and pulled at his hair. That's strange. Could it be that you were also created by the heavenly god of origin, but you don't have any origin energy, origin rules, or any kind of aura related to them? You don't look like a creation of the origin, but I can really feel that your altar is somewhat related to the void. I don't know. Don't ask me. The little girl shook her head vigorously. Yin Nuashing ignored the answer and continued to murmur. Speaking of which, the core of the primordial realm should be directly related to the void of order and the chaotic void. This kind of thing that is related to the structure of the void itself would not be biased in terms of concepts and rules. There must also be rules related to the chaotic void in the core of the primordial realm. If that's the case, then you and the altars of the cores of the primordial realms below should have been one before the 56th era. However, it was later slapped into 8 parts by the heavenly god of origin, so 1 divided into 8. The original 1 disappeared and became the current you. You might not even have memories of that time. I don't know. I don't have this memory. The little girl continued to shake her head vigorously. But what you said is quite possible. Yin Nuashing continued to murmur. If only we could find a core of the primordial realm to take a look. Everyone, sensing that the hall had suddenly quieted down, Yin Nuashing came back to her senses and hurriedly waved her hand at everyone. I was just thinking about it. We don't have the time or opportunity to do so now. We are busy preparing for war and also dealing with how to stop the underworld's invasion of the lower primordial realms. Right? The underworld has the energy to split into 8. Oh, split into 8 primordial realms, but we don't have the energy to do so. Why don't we take advantage of the fact that they are divided into 8 primordial realms? We can, with a cold expression, a cold light flashed across his palm in front of his neck. He nodded vigorously to express his agreement. Take advantage of their unpreparedness and attack their anus. Everyone, what he meant was that he understood. But why did he say that in such a creepy way? However, if the underworld wants to deal with the lower 7 primordial realms, maybe they don't need that much power, Feng Qing Wang said softly. Then the two fell silent again. If they thought about it carefully, the underworld might not need that much power to deal with the lower primordial realms. A team of Abyss Death Fog, led by a beginner Yuan Shi, That's enough. They don't need more. Just give them a little more time. Although the Yuansher's protection was still there, it could suppress the people from the lower 8 primordial realms to the limit of the primordial realms. Taking the current 7 primordial realms as an example, perhaps a divine realm expert would be the limit, and that expert would be the kind who had just entered the divine realm. No matter how silly a Yuansher was, being suppressed to a beginner divine realm expert was still a Yuansher expert. That was different. If a warrior threw away his sword, he could still pick up a branch to use. If an ordinary person picked up a sword, well, he could be a chef. That was the meaning. We heaved a long sigh and stood up quickly. Anyway, let's find a way to adjust the protection of the divine realm of origin. I have an idea. I'll go and take a look first. You guys wait here for a while. Take a look? Where? The little girl casually replied. We had already slipped away. She could only look at Yin Nuashing. The realm of the gods. Yin Nuashing looked at the distant void. He had not looked in that direction for a long time. The protection of the divine realm of origin was reactivated in the realm of the gods. If that's the case, any adjustments to the protection of that concept will have to be done in the realm of the gods. Yin Nuashing heaved a long sigh and stood up. You look travel-worn. You seem to have rolled around in the void of chaos. Go and rest for a while. We'll talk again when Hui returns. After sending the little girl to the resting area in the hall, Yin Nuashing and the others returned to the observer space. We still had no idea how long it would take to deal with it. He also used this little time to prepare. Jing Yuanji thought for a moment. She was about to go to the teleportation zone of Node 0 to collect the gathered goods and resources, so she slipped out of the space. The vast space was only left with the endless boiling sea of energy and the 3 people floating above the sea. By the way, is there anything special going on with you two? Yin Nuashing looked at Ciyu and Feng Qingwang. The 2 girls had forcefully broken through to the realm of primeval some time ago. As he had been hanging in the void outside of Node 0, his attention was mostly focused on the opposite void. No one told him about it, so he did not know about it. He kept a secret for a long time. It was only when he felt that the 2 girls' auras were not right that he realized it. He wanted to go and have a look. But because the situation at the front line had been busy, and the 2 girls had grown up and had a mission to fulfill, they had not seen each other for a while. It was only for a few thousand years. The 2 girls shook their heads. They leaned close to him and stared at the sea of energy below. Feng Qingwang whispered, "What are you doing?" "I'm making a trump card." Yin Nuashing waved his hand and threw out a ball of energy that contained 196 types of origin energy. The boiling sea of energy became even more violent. A trump card that is enough to make the underworld tremble. I can't break through to the realm of primeval, so I can only use the simplest and most unorthodox method to create some surprises. Ciyu and Feng Qingwang stared at the sea of energy below. After a while, they gave up. They could not help but smile bitterly in their hearts. Even though they had reached the realm of primeval and were even more powerful than him, they still could not understand what he was doing. He said that he was gathering energy, but the momentum of pulling the entire void towards him was obviously exaggerated. Is there anything we can do to help? So you could not help but ask. They were already in the realm of primeval. They could definitely help. Yin Nuashing was slightly stunned. He turned his head and saw the 2 girls' expectant eyes. Then he suddenly realized, these 2 girls are in the Yuansher realm. That's right. Now he really realized. Before, he had only heard about it and recognized it, but because his brain was not here, he did not realize it. He thought for a while and raised his right hand. A large ball of energy began to gather in his palm. Ciyu and Feng Qingwang stared at the gathering process nervously. The whole process made them dizzy. After all, the one standing in front of them was an inhuman who had been playing with energy for countless years. It was not something that they could do even if they were in the right realm. The gathering energy finally condensed into a colorful energy crystal the size of a thumb. Yin Nuashing pinched the crystal and looked at the 2 girls. Do you understand now? Feng Qingwang hesitated for a while. Yes, we may have a try at first. No rush. Yin Nuashing nodded. Take it slow. Even if we throw the failed product down, it won't have much of an impact. It will be broken down into pure energy by the sea of energy below. If it isn't broken down, then it has reached the standard. Is there any special use for qualified energy crystals? So you tried to make the strange energy crystal and asked curiously. Yin Nuashing nodded. It is used as an energy node. It is used to rewrite the energy nodes of those abandoned world light clusters. A world light cluster needs about 100 million of those small crystals. It is condensed into a whole in the conceptual layer of the rules. The two girls' hands trembled. 100 million, you may feel that it is a lot when you first start. But after you get used to it, it will be much faster. I can finish one in 1 or 2 days. However, I still need to make many adjustments to the whole world light cluster. It is quite complicated. It takes a lot of time to deal with one world light cluster. Ciyu and Feng Qin Wang smiled bitterly. Sure enough, some things could not be done just because one's level was right. In the next 2 days, the three of them were busy. Jing Yuanji would come to the observer dimension 3 or 4 times a day. Every time, she would go to the teleportation zone to receive the materials sent to Node 0, the huge pile of abandoned world light clusters and other things. Even when Yin Nuashing was busy, he did not forget to stare at the void. It was a habit that he had developed over several years. If he did not stare at the void, he would feel uncomfortable. Moreover, he might have to go down in a few days. He had to make some preparations at the front line of the void. Speaking of which, with millions of primeval heavenly gods guarding it, it should not collapse when he came back, right? This time, he would not be gone for too long. He would just go down to the lower realm to make some arrangements. Well, forget it. He should call Brother Lei or Sui Feng. After waiting for another day, Hui rushed back from the realm of the gods and called them to the main hall of the Node City. His face was covered in dust, and it was obvious that he had been in that abstract space. God knows what kind of strange thing he had done. For the time being, it has strengthened the power to restrict the life forms from crossing the primeval realm. But as for how effective it is, this is really unknown. After all, we are all primeval realm guys. So, I have to go down and adjust it myself. Hui said after taking a sip of water. Why can the protection of the primeval heavenly god be adjusted? So, why can you adjust that concept thing? You don't have the primeval heavenly god's aura on you. The little girl said blankly. This is a very mysterious question. In fact, we also want to know the answer. But we have no way of knowing. We only know that it can be controlled by us. Hui shrugged. This was a question that had been bothering them for a long time. It was even more troubling than the problem of the chaos void. Well, there were some things that did not need to be thoroughly understood. At this moment, they only needed to know that this thing existed. As for what to investigate, it would be difficult to achieve unless they pulled out a primeval heavenly god from the cycle of reincarnation. But we can basically guess it is one of the mysterious 771. Yin Nuashing nodded in agreement. It would not be wrong to push all the arrangements left by the realm of order to this 771. The little girl, ? The adjustment. I don't think I can do it alone. Maple, come with me? Hui rubbed his cheeks and laughed dryly. Yin Nuashing was already mentally prepared for this outcome. She stood up unhurriedly and said, the preparations at the front line are done. When we leave, Sui Feng will keep an eye on the situation on the other side of the void. If something happens, he will be able to call us back. As long as the underworld doesn't suddenly throw out 100 high-level primeval heavenly gods, there shouldn't be any problems. When are we going? The sooner the better. If the arrangements are made, let's go now. It shouldn't take too long. They really left without saying goodbye. This time, only the three of them were going. Jing Yuanji, Ciyu, and Feng Qinwang stayed at Node 0 to help look after the place. After all, it was not something that required a big fuss. The three of them just needed to go and get it done quickly. In a corner of the void in the realm of 7 elements, an extremely powerful energy suddenly appeared from the sky. Accompanied by rolling energy and countless strange phenomena, a wall that looked like an amethyst appeared in the void. Brilliant purple light spread across the void. Then, a huge hole suddenly appeared in the purple wall. 3 figures fell from it. Whoosh! As soon as they landed in the void, the 3 of them were tied up by layers of transparent energy chains 1 meter away from their bodies. Their surging aura also dropped rapidly in the blink of an eye. The speed was as fast as jumping off a cliff. In just a short while, they fell from the primeval heavenly god level and the peak of origin to the level of a new heavenly god. Then, they stood firmly and the chains disappeared. This weakening is too fast. Hui waved his hand and looked listless. Ah, heavenly god level. Ah, weak heavenly god level. Ah, it feels so tiring. Yin Nuoxing lowered her head and looked at herself. She could not help but say, the protection of the origin heavenly god is like this. That degree of weakening includes oneself, so no one can take advantage of it. Weakening oneself? Yes. Just now, I felt that all the origin energy in my body moved at the same time. Cooperating with oneself completed the suppression and sealing. Yin Nuoxing nodded and clenched her hand slightly. However, this seal seems to be able to be broken. You guys probably can't. This should be the privilege of the origin heavenly god. It seems to be possible to use the origin energy. It's probably to deal with some special situation. All right, let's not talk about this first. What do we do now? Where do we go first, and how do we deal with it? Huey's heart thumped. He scratched his head. How do we deal with it? Yin Nuoxing glanced at him and slowly rolled up her sleeves. I'll count to 3. 3. Hey, I got it. Huey's strong desire to live made him quickly raise his hand. Looking at Maple's fake smile, he forced a smile. Anyway, let's go to the center of the 7 elements realm first. It's easier there. Looking at Huey's direction in the void, the little girl could not help but put her hand on her forehead and sigh. I feel that everything is a little unreliable. Yin Nuoxing nodded with a faint smile. You've seen it once before. Hearing this, the little girl sighed again. She remembered now. Both of them were unreliable. Chapter 1747. Look for the gods of the 7 elemental realm. On the way to the center of the upper plane through the void, Hui stammered out the plan that he had thought of long ago, as if he was squeezing toothpaste out of his toothpaste. After a total of 1 or 2,000 words, only the 7 words he just said were useful. If one thought about it carefully, it was the most straightforward way. However, they knew nothing about the situation of the 7 elemental realm. Who knew? Wait a minute. Even if the 2 of them did not know, there was still one more person. Yin Nuoxing immediately looked at the little girl. Have you come into contact with them? What made him helpless was that the little girl shook her head. No, I haven't. The gods of the 7 elemental realm. I have been in the 7 elemental realm for tens of billions of years, but I have never seen them. However, when I was wandering among the stars, I heard the name mentioned by other beings of order. Yin Nuoxing heard that and he sighed helplessly. We can't make a big fuss, can we? Hui suddenly trembled. He grimaced and stared at Maple with a funny face. Don't make a fuss. The scale of your fuss is different from ours. If you make a fuss in the 7 elemental realm, I'm afraid that the void will be disintegrated by your rules. You have already torn the 8 elemental realm apart. Just leave a house for the people of the 7 elemental realm and don't make a fuss. Yin Nuoxing. No. Why did it sound like he liked to tear down houses? Even if the 8 elemental realm was the best at tearing down houses, it was definitely not him. Weren't those bastards from the underworld even more ridiculous? Ahem. Anyway, let's take it one step at a time. It's not nice to tear down other people's elemental realm just because of a disagreement. Ah, we found the center of the upper plane. Let's go. Hui quickly waved his hand to divert Maple's attention. Yin Nuoxing just nodded when she suddenly felt that something was wrong. That's not right. We came down to adjust the shelter of the heavenly god of origin, right? Why do we have to? Why do we have to look for the gods of the 7 elemental realm and run to the center of the upper plane? Can you explain it to me? This thing needs to be dealt with in the center of the void of order. Hui replied with his hands on his waist. All right, I'll believe you for now. In the 7 elements realm, Due to the existence of the shadow information, there was not much difference between the 7 elements realm and the 8 elements realm of the upper body. At least, there was no obvious difference on the surface. The rules of the upper, middle, and lower planes were clearly separated, and the marks of the rules of the void itself would not be much of a problem due to the difference in the 8 elements realm. They only needed to slightly eliminate the aura that they brought with them when crossing realms, and they would look no different from the people of the 7 elements realm. By the way, what language is used in the 7 elements realm? Yin Nuashing suddenly thought of a question. The common language of the myriad races. The little girl replied, in the previous era, the heavenly gods of origin had already made adjustments to the laws of the great Yuan realm. That wisp of laws flowed through the weak connections between the great Yuan realm and the laws of the lower Yuan realm. Now, the language that can be used in the 8 primordial realms is the common language of all races. If you just walk around the center of the void of the upper plane, you basically don't need to use any language. In those 5 eras, I rarely communicated with life. I was always alone in the void, wandering around the void. Yin Nuashing grinned bitterly. You're alone. That's not the same. Then he pointed at himself and Hui. With the 2 of us moving void collapse-level events, we'll create some unexpected situations for you. Hui glanced at Maple and fell silent. The little girl immediately became a little worried. She raised her head and sighed. You guys, take it easy. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. He didn't know if this passive skill would work in the 7 elemental realm. He hoped that it wouldn't work. He had caused enough trouble in the 8 elemental realm. If the 7 elemental realm got involved, considering that others would also have to go through a calamity, he felt a little apologetic. He sighed. His spirit subconsciously wandered and touched Jing Yuanji's soul seed. After thinking for a while, he asked, Yuanji, how's the situation in the void front line? Is there any problem? Jing Yuanji also felt a little surprised. Lord Maple and the others had just set off, and they had already sent back the news. However, she did not delay. Lord Maple, everything is fine. How are things on your side? How's the situation in the 7 elements realm? We haven't encountered anything yet. Well, I'm just trying to see if there's any problem with soul transmission across the elements realm. It's fine as long as everything is fine. After telling each other that everything was fine and confirming that the void front line was fine, Yin Nuashing was also a little relieved. But he had been talking about it not long after he left. It seemed that he was indeed a little nervous. Since he was unfamiliar with the 7 elements realm, he did not use the kind of long-distance void transmission method. Instead, he honestly flipped through the void region one by one and transmitted slowly bit by bit, for fear that he would misunderstand the rules of the void and throw himself into an inexplicable place. Half an hour later, he successfully arrived at the center of the upper plane of the 7 elements realm. In the dark void, other than the world light orbs floating in the endless sea, there was nothing else. There weren't many world light orbs either. This was the number of world light orbs in a normal timeline world. They were like stars hanging in the void, but they seemed too lonely and empty. The sparks that weren't particularly dense couldn't illuminate the void. I'm already used to the noise and chaos on my side. Now that I've come to the quiet void of the 7 elements realm, I keep feeling that something is missing. We stared at the void with sparse sparks and did not know whether to laugh or cry. He had been immersed in the noise and madness for a long time. It was rare for him to come to a quiet place with peace and quiet. He was a little unused to it. If you want to make it more chaotic here. Yin Nuashing began to move his hands. Ahem, stop fooling around. Hui coughed dryly and turned to the little girl. Let's not be in a hurry. Where did you see that person who crossed worlds last time? Although it was near the center of the upper plane, that world-like cluster had probably drifted somewhere with the waves of the void. How many years has it been? The little girl smiled bitterly. But this void is so quiet. We should be able to make some calculations. Anyway, let's find a place first. Yes, it's quiet. Yin Nuashing touched his ears and breathed a long sigh. It's so quiet. We took a deep breath as well. This peaceful, quiet void without the impact of order and chaos was really too Boom! Yin Nuashing and the other two were speechless. It was really annoying. Yin Nuashing and Hui, who had long been accustomed to the endless sounds of destruction and destruction in their ears, immediately entered a state of low pressure. They turned to look at the place where the sound of destruction that contained the destructive power of the rules came from. In the center of this void, where the world of light was the most concentrated, there was suddenly a bright energy shadow that exploded, and the vibrating energy movement was transmitted to them through the void. Let's go and take a look. Yin Nuashing raised her spirits and walked towards the place where the energy explosion occurred. Hui and the little girl looked at each other and smiled bitterly as they followed behind her slowly. The little girl could not help but mutter, "It's really a disaster generator. We haven't been here for long, and something has already happened." Huh? When they were still some distance away from the scene of the battle, Hui suddenly stopped and stared suspiciously at the place where the energy explosion occurred. "I feel a familiar presence that doesn't feel right." Yin Nuashing also stopped. "What familiar presence? What's wrong?" Hui stroked his chin and frowned. "It feels a little like the presence of the underworld, those fledglings." Yin Nuashing's expression stiffened. She subconsciously took out the Netherworld Ruin sword. Hui held back the billions of magic circles and did not activate them. "Don't be in a hurry to fire. Wait for me to finish. It feels like the presence of the fledglings, but there's no presence of the death mist in the abyss. It's also not the fledglings themselves. That is, maybe they've borrowed the power of the underworld." Yin Nuashing reacted. "Oh, after all, the highest level they can reach is the level of a newly ascended heavenly god. They do need those things from the underworld to assist them, right?" "Probably so, but I think it should be related to the power of the natural order and the power of order." "Feng, you don't often fight with fledglings, so you don't know. I've fought with them many times. This presence can trigger my reaction. It definitely has something to do with the underworld. If it has nothing to do with it, I'll eat noodles upside down in the void." Yin Nuashing glared at him. "I heard from Jingyan that you still owe her a meal of noodles." "Wait, and there's no up, down, left, and right in the void. Aren't you just cheating for food?" I... Hui laughed dryly. His face was full of sweat. Let's go have a look. Our luck is not bad. We've just arrived, and we've already met those people from the underworld." Yin Nuashing frowned unnaturally as she watched Hui hurriedly sneak towards the place where the energy was erupting. The little girl had only met those guys who might have come out to scout the area. She did not expect them to have already started attacking. And from the looks of it, they did not intend to launch an army as soon as they arrived. Instead, they wanted to use the power of the world of order to cause them to disintegrate from the inside and then overturn the 7 elemental realms. These guys are still so insidious. However, could he conclude that those people from the underworld no longer have any more power to be unparalleled in the 7 elemental realms? Or could it be that they were not ready to be unparalleled, so they were just warming up in the void of order now? If that's the case, we might have to stir up some trouble here too. Yin Nuashing muttered to herself. "Huya, what did you say?" "I said, if the underworld wants to stir up trouble in the various elemental realms, we have to stir up some trouble too." After a while, the three of them arrived at the periphery of the battle. They were still invisible from a distance, so they could directly observe the energy flashes that occasionally erupted in the void in front of them. Weak energy outbursts. Perhaps because the rules and order were not particularly strong, a battle of this level in the void seemed too forced. Whether it was the energy that was emitted through the void or the energy that had already erupted, it was quickly annihilated under the influence of the void's power. It was unlike the battles in their 8 elemental realms, where the void could be sunk when they fought. If the 7 elemental realms were a weakened version of the 8 elemental realms, then the degree of weakening of life in the 7 elemental realms was far greater than the degree of weakening of the void. When life that stood at the top of the world fought, the degree of destruction to the void, well, it was obvious at a glance. But there's something wrong with one side. Look at that side. The energy they emit obviously stays in the void for a longer time. Hui pointed at one of the groups and said, "Is that the group that you said has the aura of the underworld's fledgling?" Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms and took a closer look. She could not help but smile bitterly. She had been in charge of the overall situation for too long, so she was not very clear about the small details. Her senses were already used to being immersed in the abyss's death fog, order, and chaos. She was not as clear as Hui about the aura of the fledgling. Of the two groups of people fighting in front of them, one was a humanoid creature, and the other was also a humanoid creature. That was nonsense. Let's talk about it from another perspective. On both sides of the battle, there was a group of people who had probably escaped from the world of light. They were fleeing in the void pathetically and had no intention to continue fighting. On the other hand, the group with the fledgling's aura was chasing after them relentlessly. They were determined to bury the former in the void. As the two groups of people chased and fled in the void, they soon rushed into their close-range attack range. That was when they could see the situation clearly. Among the group of people being chased, there were more than 10 young people who looked to be around 16 or 17 years old. There were a mix of males and females. At this moment, all of them were pale and panicked. Their realms were far from being able to cross the void. Therefore, they were wrapped in the law domain and brought into the void. Other than this group of young people, there were a few young men and women who were desperately fighting against the forces chasing after them. They then led the others into the void. They were at a loss as to where they should escape to. This group of people was obviously not in good condition. Furthermore, they were dragging along more than 10 burdens. Just escaping from the world of light might be very difficult. While Yin Nuoxing and the others were observing for a while, the pursuers behind them suddenly sped up. They split into 3 groups and rushed to the front, surrounding the group of people in a sealing circle. Even the law domain had been opened, trapping them in this place. Hee, what do you think you are escaping to, little fellas? A man in white, standing at the forefront of the void, looked down at the 10 or so little fellas in the sealing circle. He flashed the weapon in his hand and laughed strangely. "Who are you? We have no enmity with you. Why do you have to kill us all?" Among the surrounded group of people, the young man spoke with a gloomy expression. "There is no reason. You just need to know that someone wants you to die." The man in white waved his hand and pointed his weapon forward. He was filled with killing intent. "Do it. Leave no one alive." "Phone, that guy spoke. Looks like he should be the leader. Let's not delay any longer. Take him." We made a choking gesture at the man in white who spoke first. "Oh, that's fine. I'll leave the 7 in the back to you. Leave the few in front to me. I'll tie up the remaining one." Yin Nuoxing nodded. She turned to the little girl and said, "You'll be the same as before. Field control. I'm the best at it." The little girl spread her hands and nodded with a smile. While the 3 of them were not in a hurry, the group of people in white had already launched an attack. They launched a fierce attack on the group of young people in the sealed circle. Waves of violent energy surged out like a tide. The terrifying energy phenomenon was like the birth of countless gods and demons. The instant they attacked, it was an attack that killed them instantly. Everyone in the circle was filled with despair. The young man and woman with tears on their faces also clenched their weapons at this moment. The energy in their bodies boiled as they prepared to fight to the death. Bang! Just as the energy was about to break through their law domain, an invisible energy suddenly spread out. The vast energy coming from all directions froze and then turned into ashes in an instant. Even the void trembled slightly. This sudden change stunned everyone present. Whether it was the group of young people who were prepared to fight to the death or the group of people in white, they were all stunned. Who dares to meddle in other people's business? The white-robed captain's gaze swept across the void, and the weapon in his hand drew a few cold glints. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by a series of screams that rang in his ears. "Boss! Run! Run!" He had just turned his head to look at other places in the void. When he turned his head back, the dozen people in white fell from the void like birds with broken wings. They quickly melted into the void, and not even a trace of them was left. This even more bizarre scene caused the young men and women who were surrounded in the blockade to be shocked. While a wisp of disbelief surged into their eyes, they were also slightly bewildered and uncertain. "Hey, young man, I have something to talk to you about." A low chuckle echoed quietly in his ears. It was as if the void was murmuring beside his ears with the lingering sounds of destruction. Every sound was soul-stirring, causing the white-clothed captain to instantly feel a chill from head to toe. It was as if his blood was about to freeze. He abruptly turned his head, only to see a pair of gorgeous eyes occupying his entire vision. Those eyes that contained countless wills caused him to faint before he could even react. He fainted with just one look? The little girl looked at Yin Nuashing and couldn't help but be a little shocked. She curiously looked at his colorful eyes that were fading away and trembled. All right, no wonder he fainted. Yin Nuashing grinned and raised his hand to snap his fingers. The chains of order wrapped around the leader in white. Just one look is enough to deal with these little things. Do you really want me to dig a hole in the void? The group of young men and women blinked in shock. They clearly didn't see anyone in the void just now. How did there suddenly appear three people? Young lady, thank you for saving us. However, they didn't care about that for now. The young man who was walking at the front hurriedly stepped forward and cupped his hands to Yin Nuashing. He couldn't suppress the joy in his heart, and his voice was a little excited. Yin Nuashing faintly sighed. Forget it. I'm used to it. He calmly waved his hand and said, Don't be in such a hurry to be happy. We help because we need... Do you understand? The young man suddenly understood and hurriedly nodded. Benefactor, you helped us. If there's anything you need me for, just let me know. However, he turned around and looked at the group of people who were still in shock. He smiled bitterly and said, Can you give me some time to settle my people? Yin Nuashing's hand shook and threw the leader in white to Hui. He looked straight at the world of light that they had escaped from and said, No problem. Did you come out from there? Yes. However, the young man's expression was a little unnatural. There's no place to stay there. The entire source world belongs to them. Oh, that's good. Let's go there. Yin Nuashing nodded. What he said gave him a big fright. The young man's face was also full of panic. You mustn't. That place is it's okay. Hui shook the white-clothed captain with all his might. We're going to find trouble with them. Oh, you guys could just follow us. Don't be afraid. You'll be fine if you follow us. Hui shook the leader in white like a windmill and gave the young man and the others a thumbs up. He revealed a dazzling smile, which made them a little stunned. While they were stunned, Hui and the others had already dragged them to the world of light. The young man and the others who had just calmed down smiled bitterly. They had just escaped from there, and now they had to run back. Although the three people in front of them seemed to be very powerful, no matter how powerful they were, could they fight against the power of an entire source world? It seems that the entire world of light has indeed been occupied by them. We looked into the starry sky and couldn't help but nod. The entire world is filled with that stench. It's the kind that can't be concealed even if you want to. Yin Nuashing yawned in response. The power of a world's light group will only take a short while. Wait a minute. This is the Seven Elements realm. Their power is suppressed. Then a short while is not enough. Let's wait a little longer. We're from a Yuxian continent. We're just a family with a good inheritance in our own continent. We're only second-rate in that star field. A month ago, a group of people in white came from nowhere and descended on the Yuxian continent. They immediately suppressed the main power of the entire continent. Then they purged the entire continent. The young man whispered. As he spoke, he couldn't help but glance at the three people not far in front of him. Our family fled for half a month. In the end, only we escaped. Hui tilted his head and looked at the group of young men and women behind him. Probably because they suddenly turned around and ran back, they looked very nervous. Even if nothing happened at the moment, they couldn't relax. Well, a part of the fire seed escaped. That's pretty impressive. Hui couldn't help but fold his arms and nod. Although it's not good to be sarcastic now, you have to recognize the reality. Not many people in the same world as you can escape. After all, it's that group of people. Yin Nuashing and the little girl sighed in their hearts. It's that group of people who overturned the eight elements realm behind the scenes. Chapter 1748. There were a lot of empty spaces in the void and planetary systems. In a vast and boundless space, there was a considerable distance between every world and every star. There would always be some weird things hidden in the territory that was so vast that it was difficult to accurately count, including some ill-intentioned things. However, that unscrupulous bastard was obviously not in the void or the stars nearby. That bastard might have used some method to create a group of executors and then ran off to other places to continue his great undertaking. This method of slowly destroying and inciting the forces of order and causing them to kill each other was not very effective. The only thing that could be seen from this was that the bastard had too much of a bad taste, and that he definitely did not prepare his own power. The Pengxian continent was a planet that was peaceful and lifeless. Only the residual energy was slowly weakening and dissipating here and there. The scenery of green mountains and clear waters that could not be completely destroyed had also been torn apart. The scale of the city before them was quite large, and it was not difficult to restore the once magnificent scene from the ruins. But now, there was only a beehive-like cluster of debris in front of them. The streets and scenery were all buried in the smoke. The once tall buildings that occupied a large area were only left with some bases, and there was not even debris around them. It might have been directly devoured by a powerful destructive energy. There were also tall buildings that were torn into two halves. If not for the amazing strength of the material itself, it might have collapsed into a pile of debris. It was a completely destroyed city, and not in one fell swoop. It was not difficult to find 3, 4, 5, 6 signs of destruction. Black embers, wreckage, and debris piled up all over the ground. The mixed energy eroded the smell of the debris and gradually spread into the air. It was rare to see a street without too many traces of destruction, and before them was a ground full of corpses. The hundreds of corpses were mostly ordinary life forms. Post-divine tier life forms basically did not leave behind corpses. This law was also in effect in the 7 elemental realms. The corpses all over the ground were a mix of ordinary people, soldiers, and some life forms with some strength. Most of them died because their internal organs were shattered by energy, and some fell from the sky like dolls. Apart from those who were left with half a body, legs, or upper body, well, considering that there was a group of inexperienced young boys and girls here, he would not say such disgusting things. Hui swung his hand and threw the group of white-robed people in his hand onto the pillar in front of him. Other than the white-robed captain who had been captured at the beginning, the other few people seemed to be stationed in the Yu-Xian continent to continue causing destruction to ensure that no one survived. When they landed, they encountered them and conveniently pressed them to the ground. Now, the group of young men and women whose families had been destroyed were all glaring at the group of white-robed people. Their eyes were filled with uncontrollable anger and hatred. All right, how should we deal with these guys now? Hui clapped his hands and pointed at the group of people in white. I reckon you guys don't know anything either. Why don't we try asking? Where did you guys come from? What were they doing here? Have you seen the person at the top? The captain in white raised his head and sneered at Hui. Idiot, your actions today will bring destruction upon yourself. You Divine energy transformed into golden flames that engulfed the white-clothed captain. His frenzied roar reverberated through the silent street, sounding particularly horrifying. All right, you disobedient fellow. After incinerating the corpse, Hui waved his hand and looked at the other man in white. Then what about you? Hui, there's no need to interrogate him. Yin Nuoxing jumped down from a broken pillar that was 1 meter tall. She glanced at the group of people in white and said indifferently, their souls have been shackled by that power. I tried to pry into them, but I couldn't find anything. What? You should have said so earlier. If you had said so, I wouldn't have brought them back. Hui was stunned when he heard that. He looked at the group of people in white with disdain. He casually opened a crack in the void and threw the group of people into nothingness amidst their screams. He watched as they were swallowed up by the rules of nothingness bit by bit and disintegrated completely. Only then did he sigh. This is great. What can we do without any clues? Why don't we deal with the protection of the origin heavenly god first? Yin Nuoxing raised her head. The Pengxian continent was completely devoid of life. There were still energy bursts from the world of light here in the depths of the star field. They might be able to find something there, but they would only be able to find that group of people in white. However, it was still necessary to defeat that group of people and save the people on the life stars that were surrounded by them. Save them first. Things have gone beyond our expectations. We have to think of a way to salvage the situation and stabilize the situation. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head. It would be easy to deal with if there was only one person. However, I never thought that he would do something like this in the world of order. If things were allowed to develop on their own, perhaps the world of order would collapse on its own. Still, there's a chance that the gods would come to the rescue before things get to the worst. But before they come to the rescue, I should make the first move. Yin Nuoxing growled and stabbed the Netheruan sword into the ground with both hands. That familiar posture and that familiar energy made Hui pale with fright. Just as he thought that the observer's brain had gone haywire and was about to unleash origin, chaos to flatten the world of light, he saw the observer's body tremble slightly and split into 40 or 50 illusory energy figures. Then, with the great sword in her hand, her figure flashed and disappeared from sight. I thought you were going to yell, "Origin, chaos." Yin Nuoxing pulled out the Netheruan sword and rolled her eyes at the abnormal guardian. If I did, this place would have collapsed already. Those energy figures are enough. For now, let's see how things go. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand and put away the Netheruan sword. Then, she suddenly cursed. Wait a minute. How did things escalate again? Didn't we just come here to arrange that thing? You'll have to tell that shit stir. We spread his hands and sighed helplessly. Although they had planned to come here to adjust the origin heavenly god's protection, who would have thought that the underworld had already made a move on the 7 elemental realms? Moreover, they had used such an insidious method. That was why it was said that plans could not keep up with changes. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head in distress. We don't have much time to stay here, and we don't have the time to clean up this chaotic place. It seems that we can only use some abnormal methods to fight for time. Abnormal methods mean. Hui paused. Seeing Maple's uneasy expression, he immediately understood. As expected, you still want to flatten the entire world. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and turned around to flick his long hair. He looked at the group of young men and women and said, the Yuxian continent has already been destroyed. It is probably not safe to leave you here. How about I bring you to other planets with living beings? That's all right. Sorry to trouble you. The young man thought for a moment and nodded. Right now, they had no better place to go. The Pengxian continent had already been destroyed, and there was not a single life left. There were only mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Don't be in a hurry to relax. There are still some things that you need to do. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed with a myriad of colors. She waved her hand and threw out several energy runes to brand the young men and women. As you can see, the goal of these shit stirs is destruction and destruction. It's not just the Pengxian continent, but other planets and other worlds as well. We don't have much time to move around. Try to gather all of you who have lost your minds because of the sudden disaster. You'll have to deal with the rest by yourselves. Patting the shoulder of the young man who was at a loss, Yin Nuoxing said in a deep voice, whether you gather your strength for revenge or self-preservation, it's up to you. The only thing I can tell you is that this is a war. It's not a natural disaster, but a man-made disaster. Moreover, it's far from over. Hui, you guys go deal with that shield. I'll take them to clean up the shit stirs in this world. Yin Nuoxing turned and said to Hui. Then, without another word, she led the group and soared into the sky. That fellow is really impatient. Hui helplessly shook his head and sighed. Although time is indeed a little tight, haha, let's hurry up. The little girl glanced at the place where Yin Nuoxing disappeared. She couldn't help but mutter, he won't cause any trouble, right? Well, I think. Hui, who had a little enthusiasm just now, suddenly had a gloomy expression on his face. He bitterly said, well, under normal circumstances, there's actually no problem. But if there's an abnormal situation, hiss, looking at how Feng is in such a hurry, I'm afraid something will happen. Something small? Something like destroying half of the seven elements realm's void. The little girl, but there's no other way. We're really in a hurry now. Well, we can only pray that Feng will be merciful. Hui smiled bitterly. He waved his hand and left the place with the little girl. Being merciful or something like that didn't exist. The best way to end a battle was to completely destroy one side of the battle or to kill both sides together. He didn't know why this group of people in white became the puppets of the underworld. But since they had already decided to be controlled by that kind of thing, there was no need for him to be merciful. In the end, if all of this was compared to the void level, it was just a collision and battle of lives. No matter what the story behind it was, no matter what kind of experience they had in the past, as long as they reached this level, it was no longer important. Standing on this kind of battlefield, there was only life or death. It was not particularly troublesome to annihilate all the people in white in the light cluster of the entire world into the void, especially when he decided to set aside his bottom line and do whatever he wanted. He would only do it more decisively and simply and crudely. Just like the part of the energy doppelgangers that he had just released from the Pengxian continent. Well, when he brought people to another place where there was still a breath of life, all the people in white there were already dead. Those energy doppelgangers were very conscientious in their duties. They rushed into the starry sky and continued to find another place to vent their anger. Well, they really were venting their anger. He could feel the remnants of resentment from his doppelgangers. It seemed that he should have carried a little bit of resentment when he split them out. Damn, the underworld. It was bad enough that it caused trouble for him every day. It just had to obediently bombard one place. Why did it have to extend its stinky hands and feet to the lower elemental realm? Now, he still had to come to the lower elemental realm to clean up the mess. At this moment, on this living continent that still had traces of war, another group of people who had obviously gathered their entire army but could only stand there in a daze after half of the enemies were wiped out. They were gathering and resting on the broken land that was full of potholes. When the leader saw the owner of the dozens of energy doppelgangers appear in front of him, he clearly shuddered. "Thank you for your help, miss." "We stop." Yin Nuoxing reached out to stop the leader's long-winded speech and pointed at the people he brought with him. Then she said to the leader, "I have told them about what is happening in the void right now. They will tell you about it. Guide, it's fine if you think that way. Just listen to what should be done and how to deal with it. If you don't want to become a meaningless energy that fades into the void in the future, it's best that you gather all the power you can now." The leader listened blankly to Yin Nuoxing's long speech. After a long while, he asked dumbly, "What's wrong with the void? They have declared war on the void of order, and you have already started fighting. That's it. I still have something to do here, so I'll take my leave. See you in the void another day." Everyone was speechless. Yin Nuoxing came and went like a gust of wind, leaving them all at a loss. The only thing they could understand was that there was going to be a war, and they had already started fighting. Perhaps because they were at the center of the void's upper plane, the speed of their fight was exceptionally fast. Following the same steps to wipe out all the white-robed people in this entire world of light and leave directions for the lost life forms, Yin Nuoxing wandered around the nearby void. When he arrived at the Seven Elements realm, he had coincidentally picked a random world of light and had yet to see what was going on in his neighbor's house. When he hurriedly looked into the dozens of nearby world of light, he inhaled sharply. It would have been better if he didn't look. Holy crap, the battle had already turned the world upside down. 2 world of light had already been destroyed, and when he looked inside, the entire starry sky was filled with the presence of death. There was not much life, and he could even see the white-robed people finishing their carpet search and retreating. Were they really going straight to the root of the problem, destroying the center of the upper plane first, and then slowly dealing with the rest? Oh no, how was he going to fight this? Should he ask the front line of the void to call a small team over for help? Or should he just use Wu Shuang to stop this void first? Just as Yin Nuoxing was busy sighing, a strange movement came from the void. It seemed to originate from the entire concept layer of the rules. It was a kind of, well, it could probably be regarded as a natural astronomical phenomenon. It was like watching the sky turn yellow bit by bit when it was close to dusk. Occasionally, it would turn blood red, and even the moon would be dyed orange red. That kind of natural feeling, but one would be used to this kind of normal astronomical phenomenon. They would not even stop for long because of this and continue moving forward. They knew that something had happened, but they treated it as a matter of course. Probably, something beyond imagination had secretly made some adjustments. Yin Nuoxing pressed his chest and frowned slightly. Divinity and divine right have been further suppressed. Such a large-scale influence originated from the rules and concepts. It seems that Huey's side is done. I didn't expect that the protection of the heavenly god of origin could really adjust. Maple, Hui and the little girl appear beside Yin Nuoxing together. The two of them followed his gaze and looked at the light of the worlds. Their expressions did not look good. Is it already that serious? It was already hundreds of millions of years ago when we discovered their appearance. Such a long time is enough for them to do a lot of things. What's happening right now doesn't look like something that can be arranged in just a few hundred years. Who knows how much effort they have put into this? Yin Nuoxing rubbed his forehead with a headache. However, just by looking at the battle, it should be a battle that started recently. That was the only thing that he could be sure of. Deliberately watching the worlds of order kill each other? What a bad taste. By the way, after the protection of the heavenly god of origin was adjusted, the divinity and divine right of those who cross over would be suppressed at the same time. I think that the other side might have already sensed it. Yin Nuoxing looked at the void and said calmly, "It's that group of people from the underworld." Ah, speaking of this, he seemed to have thought of something. Could it be that because they knew that the heavenly god of origin was protecting them, they felt that it was too inconvenient or too difficult for them to make a move, so they chose to instigate the forces of the worlds of order to make them busy fighting among themselves? Huey's expression froze when he heard this. Isn't that bad? What should we do? Should we go after him? I don't know. I haven't thought of what to do either. I just hope that he can treat it as a normal thing and ignore it or something. Huh, that should be impossible. However, we don't have time to stay here and play hide-and-seek with him. We don't even know where he is, so how can we deal with him? Yin Nuoxing sighed bitterly and turned his gaze to the light of the worlds just now. Right now, we have only urgently gathered the remnant forces of one world. Although there are instructions left behind to tell them what to do at the moment, we haven't decided whether to go to the 6 elemental realms or stay behind to provide some support. It's hard to decide. Hui scratched his head and said without any reason, "Do you think that the celestials of the 7 elemental realms have been killed?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. The little girl shook her head gently. Not really. Even if the heavenly god of origin of the 8 elemental realms came here, it wouldn't be so easy to kill the celestials under the protection and suppression of the heavenly god of origin. At least, it would be impossible for just 1 or 2 people to do it. The celestials have stood in the void for the same period of time as the void. It has been a few epochs. You can rest assured. We did not feel relaxed after hearing this. After thinking for a while, he suddenly snapped his fingers. "Phone, if you can't think of it, I have an idea. Let's call 2 people from the front line to help. We don't need the heavenly god of origin. Just send 2 people of the origin realm to help. Just like what they did, we can push the situation in the dark. We will continue to the 6 elemental realms and the 5 elemental realms. When we're done with these things, if each elemental realm has its own problems, we can solve them separately. Instead of dilly-dallying here and not knowing what to do, why don't we do what we have to do at present?" You said it. Yin Nuoxing also thought for a long time after hearing this. After thinking for a few minutes, she still could not think of a more suitable way. She could only sigh and nod. Well, it seems that this is the only way for now. My shadow doppelgangers are not easy to control across elemental realms. If we leave them here to act at will, it's hard to say what will happen to the 7 elemental realms. Let's send a few people to clean up the mess. Hundreds of millions of years ago, when they saw an unknown person crossing the elemental realms for a stroll, it should have just been an early warning signal. It was within the scope of emergency preparations. However, the first person who discovered it was wandering around the great elemental realm at that time, and the 8 elemental realms were in chaos, so he did not have time to take a look at the lower realm. Therefore, that early warning signal was ignored just like that. When they came back to their senses a few 100 million years later, the disaster had already taken shape, and they were now, in a panic, trying to save something. Phew, was there really a need to save something? Well, there was still a need to save something. After all, their purpose was to hide the location of the core of the elemental realms of the 7 elemental realms. That thing, well, they did not know where it was. The little girl seemed to know, but she only vaguely said that it was in the void of order. As for where it was now, they still needed to find it. But it was not a big problem. They did not have to find the core of the elemental realms of the 7 elemental realms. As long as they could ensure that the elemental realms of the 7 elemental realms of order were a little safer, even if a fight broke out, it would not be a one-sided battle. As long as the above conditions were met, it would be enough. However, it was just that seeing the underworld stirring up trouble here and hiding in the dark, it was really a little irritable. Sending reinforcements to the 7 elemental realms. When Jing Yuanji received the news from Lord Feng, she felt a little helpless. As expected, the underworld has already made a move there, and it's not peaceful. While the front and back of the house are on fire, they still have to think of a way to save the neighbors next door, even though they can't even save themselves. Phew. 3 to 5 people should be enough, according to Lord Feng's plan. She wanted to confirm with Lord Feng, but there was no response from the other end of the soul transmission. She tried for a few minutes, but could not contact Lord Feng, who was far away on the other side of the elemental realm. Could he have gone to the 6 elemental realms? Should I also? Cough. Forget it. She should just stay at the front line of the void. Right now, the 765-321 elemental realms were probably in a mess, and it was a mess that could not be cleaned up in a short time. Chapter 1749. In the void, the resonating sounds of energy reverberated. It was as if one was standing on a reef on the coast and listening to the rolling thunder caused by the waves crashing against the mountain walls and boulders. It was very shocking, both visually and auditorily. The energy traces that filled the void were energy runes that were only 2 fingers wide. Words and lines were squeezed together without leaving much space. From afar, it looked as if a golden curtain had fallen in front of one's eyes, fluttering in the void like ribbons and silk. It was exceptionally gorgeous. When the thunderous roar that reverberated in the void gradually weakened, the huge golden curtain in the void also gradually became transparent. Finally, it disappeared into the void, and the thunderous roar also gradually faded away. Well, it's done. Now, even the protection of the first Yuan realm has been set up. Let's patrol one more time. If there's nothing else, let's hurry back. Hui clapped his hands and smiled faintly after seeing the golden light dim. He tilted his head and said to Maple and the little girl. The little girl scratched her head and looked at the void where the golden light dissipated. She could not help but frown. Did you notice that the arrangements you made in the first Yuan realm and second Yuan realm seem to be very... Well, I'll tell you straight, don't mind it. I keep having a feeling that it's not very sturdy, as if it can be easily pierced through. You can tell. Hui scratched his head awkwardly and laughed dryly. That's actually not my problem. It's because the first Yuan realm and second Yuan realm are too sparse. The little girl could only shake her head helplessly. The situation in the first Yuan realm and second Yuan realm was quite terrible. But this did not mean that the environment was really terrible. It was just that for the 3 of them, the first Yuan realm and second Yuan realm were very bad. It was the kind of bad where they could not acclimatize. However, the first Yuan realm and second Yuan realm were not a problem for the beings in the first Yuan realm and second Yuan realm. This was the best example of living in the current void environment and being controlled by the void. When they came from the 8 elements realm to the first and second elements realms, their realms and godly rights had been suppressed to the lowest level. If they returned to the eight elements realm in such a state, they would be just like ordinary people, about the level of a kid who had just started cultivating for less than 2 years. This was already the ceiling of the first and second elements realms. It was unknown why the shadow information passed down from the eight elements realm was so weak. So far, other than the 7 elemental realms that were on the verge of total chaos, the other lower elemental realms were relatively safe. No one knew that there would be a turmoil in the near future, and they were not sure if it would happen. They were just making preparations in advance to prevent trouble before it happened. Later, there were also people who came to arrange the future affairs of several lower elemental realms for them. Only when the other places were safe and sound could they gather all their thoughts to fight against the underworld. If the lower primordial realm were to catch fire as they fought, and the core of the primordial realm fell into their hands, then this battle would be the silence and emptiness of the first and second elements realms had its advantages. With such emptiness, the underworld would probably be too lazy to come and cause trouble. They would only focus on finding the core of the primordial realm. The difficulty of finding the core of the primordial realm was at the level of full stars. Even if the heavenly god of the beginning wanted to find the core of the primordial realm, it could only be a coincidence. Hui tilted his head. The void, the emptiness, the deathly silence of the void. It was really, really empty. In the past, when he was in the deity realm, he would look up at the starry sky and the open field at night. Billions of stars accompanied the moon. Even though it was such a vast and beautiful starry sky, when he was at the other end of the starry sky, he would also see that the starry sky was so empty. The distance between each star was far less than what he saw in the deity realm. The same was true for the void. The voids of the 8 elements realms and the 7 elements realms were almost the same, but the world-like clusters that existed in the first and second elements realms were not as simple as looking at each other across the sea. These 2 voids were really barren. How barren was it? In front of them was the center of the upper plane. In front of them were 6 world-like clusters. Yes, 6. That was it. The surroundings were all empty voids. Even the voids close to the world-like clusters were pure black instead of pale purple. You don't understand? Then he reported another number. In the 8 elements realm, since there were 10 or 20,000 timelines that were squeezed into the 0-point world, there were more than 80 or 90 world-like clusters in the center of the 7 elements realms. There were also groups of light clusters a little further away. They were scattered everywhere like small villages and towns. There were more than 70 world light clusters in the 6 elements realms. According to the pattern, the number of world light clusters decreased gradually. Oh, wait. He forgot one thing. When the 4 elements realm was cut to the 3rd elements realm, there was a steep drop. It was really the strength of the void jumping into water. Behind it was the sea. In the center of the upper plane of the 3rd elements realm, there were only about 20 world light clusters. Well, when he thought about it this way, it was understandable that the first and second elements realms were so barren. The degree of weakness of the first and second elements realms makes me feel that these 2 elements realms are like a half-finished product. He scratched the back of his head and said, "It's like the whole great element realm is a cake. 5 parts of it are given to the 8 elements realms. 4.5 parts are unevenly distributed to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th elements realms, and the remaining half parts are given to the 1st and 2nd elements realms." Actually, this was deliberately arranged. Yin Nuashing suddenly spoke. Her eyes that were casually looking into the void seemed a little empty, as if she was absent-minded. However, her words were very clear. After the end of the Chaos era, the god of origin divided the great element realm into 8 parts. He left the 2 most important parts in the 8 elements realms and divided the rest below. The 2 parts you're talking about, the original void of order, the original void of chaos. Yin Nuashing nodded gently. The remaining parts are just fragments that were forcibly cut out to meet the conditions. However, because they became fragments, They met the conditions themselves and finally evolved into the other 7 elements realms. This is the answer, they told me. I see. Hui nodded in realization. He raised his head and looked at Feng. Seeing that he had been looking at a certain place, Hui also looked at the void curiously. What are you looking at? You have been staring at it since the beginning. I'm looking for a place. Yin Oshing raised her hand and pointed up and said softly, the location is the 3rd element's realm. It is something that happened a long time ago. If I had not just come down from the 3rd element's realm, I would not have suddenly recalled this matter. A place? Hui crossed his arms and was also very curious. What place in the 3rd element's realm can attract your attention? Is it related to the god of origin? When these words were mentioned, Yin Nuoxing could not help but tremble. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. It had been a few eras, but there was still a shadow in his heart that had not dissipated in time. After a moment of silence, he seemed to be wondering if he should say this matter. After Hui poked his arm for a minute, he decided to say it. The abyss of 10,000 spirits. Yin Nuoxing carefully looked at the expressions of the 2 people. They were stunned. Only then did she ask unhurriedly, how is it? Have you heard of it? The abyss of 10,000 spirits. Hui touched his chin and looked at the little girl in silence. They could see the confusion in each other's eyes. This small expression fell into Yin Nuoxing's eyes, and he also understood something. This place might not have existed in the Dark Age, or it might have existed, but it had not been known as a fierce place, or it might not have a name yet. The abyss of 10,000 spirits had always existed since the Ancient Age. That's right, it had always existed. It had always existed in the 139th era. He was not sure at that time. At that time, he had not gone to the 3rd element's realm, and there were not many people who could cross realms. This information was forcibly cut off by the void. However, according to the information left by Jilu and Hui, at least from the Ancient Age to the 100th era, the abyss of 10,000 spirits still existed. This was interesting. The world-like clusters of the 3rd element's realm had a much shorter lifespan than the world-like clusters of the 8 elements realm. They would be annihilated in 100 billion years to 10 trillion years at most, and those were the indifferent world-like clusters. Some of the more violent world-like clusters might burn themselves up in a few billion years. According to the observation he had just made in the 3rd element's realm, as the rules of the Great Void became weaker and weaker, this number would only be lower and not higher. This was one of the limiting conditions. The second limiting condition was the Great Samsara. This void that existed like a gatekeeper every 20 years would push the entire Great Origin realm back to its mother's womb. The worlds of the 8 elements realm would be completely annihilated. Except for the 3 big worlds and some extremely special things, there would basically be nothing left. According to this, was the abyss of 10,000 spirits itself a special existence? Could it really be related to that origin? He did not dare to think about it anymore. He always felt that if he did, he would have a stomachache. What kind of place? He scratched his head and asked, what kind of place? What kind of place? How should I put it? Yin Nuoxing crossed his arms and pinched his hair. He pondered and slowly opened his mouth. It's that kind of very rare, very inexplicable. I'll tell you this. It's a world in the 3 elements realm, but it has the imprint of the God realm. It's the kind of imprint that people get when they break the realm outside and return to their hometown from the sky. You know what I'm saying, right? Divine God level. It's the brand of the divine God level that is calculated by our level. And it's not suppressed. This thing shouldn't be suppressed in the first place. Huey's eyes widened. Are you kidding me? Do you think I'm in a mood to joke with you? Yin Nuoxing covered her face and smiled bitterly. When I first learned of this news, I also suspected that the void was playing a joke on me. But that's the truth. But that's not right. Although this era is a little chaotic, there are still some people who cross over. Since it's such a special place, why haven't we heard of it? Hui scratched his head in confusion. Because many people died. Those who crossed over from the 8th element's realm were suppressed, and then were killed by the brand of the divine God and thrown back to the 8th element's realm. They probably felt that it was too embarrassing so they didn't have the nerve to say it. Yin Nuashing spread her hands. She was talking nonsense. Since Hui had never heard of the Dark Age, then the abyss of 10,000 spirits either didn't exist or it hadn't been discovered yet. Okay, it's not that I can't understand. Hui scratched his head. Then have you found the place? Not yet. I'm still looking for it. Yin Nuashing shook her head with a bitter smile. She swept her eyes across the third element's realm's barrier and looked in the direction of the third element's realm. The place you're talking about. The little girl suddenly recovered from her contemplation. I think I know it. I think I've been there. Been there? Yin Nuashing and Hui both turned to look at her. Have you been there when you were wandering around the third element's realm? The little girl nodded. I didn't pay attention to that place at first. It was the consciousness of the third element's realm's altar that mentioned it to me. That's why I want to take a look out of curiosity. Just as you said, with the brand of the divine god realm as a natural barrier, such a barrier erected in the third element's realm is basically indestructible. Is it the brand of the divine god realm or the brand of the heavenly god of origin? Yin Nuashing asked. The divine god realm. The little girl answered with certainty. Then she shrugged. But it's been hundreds of millions of years. It could be 1 billion years or even tens of billions of years. Who knows if the brand of the divine god realm will become the heavenly god of origin? Yin Nuashing nodded on the surface, but she was a little doubtful in her heart. The barrier of the divine god realm could indeed block the great samsara, but it definitely wouldn't be completely undamaged. She had only heard of this place in the ancient era, but she had never really been there. She heard that there were only a lot of divine god realm brands in sight. People back then probably couldn't see the brand of the heavenly god of origin. Anyway, we'll know when we get there. Yin Nuashing waved her hand. She waved her hand and opened a purple portal in front of her. She took the lead and walked in. Hui and the little girl followed closely behind. Hui even closed the door. Turning around, the three of them took a deep breath at the same time. The aura on their bodies slowly rose. Soon, they recovered, but not much. Do you still remember where the abyss of myriad spirits is? Hui turned to look at the other two. Let me think about this. Yin Nuashing waved her hand and opened the portal across the void again. As she opened the door, she said, I only remember the location of the lower plane. Although it's been many years, I heard that it's very special. There are some restrictions and strange things, so it shouldn't be too far away. Hearing that, the little girl clapped her hands. If we can determine that it's indeed the lower plane, I have a way to find it quickly. I still vaguely remember the aura of that place. After passing through this void teleportation gate, the little girl swayed left and right on the spot, constantly sniffing left and right with her small nose, causing Yin Nuashing and Huey's expressions to become a little strange in an instant. Why is this fellow looking for a path like that? Found it. It's here. The little girl waved her hand, and the power of divine destruction enveloped the three of them in a flash. Yin Nuashing and Huey's expressions were full of subtlety. It was not so convenient to find a way in the void, especially to find a place where they had been before, but only vaguely remember the aura. It was very easy to confuse one's memory, mix up the aura with other auras, and find the wrong place. They had already experienced this kind of thing personally. After wandering around in the lower plane for a long time, about half an hour of the Yuan realm time had passed. The three of them confirmed their location through the last void portal and returned to the surface from the depths of the void. UNG, everything is as usual here. We ran into some trouble in the Yuan realm. We'll be back in a day or two. How's the void frontline? Everything is fine, Lord Foam. I wish you a safe journey. After the void portal, Yin Nuashing first reported to Jing Yuanji, who was far away into Yuan realm. Except for him and Hui, the others could not communicate through the soul seed across the void. What they borrowed was actually the power of the realm of the gods. He was also worried that suddenly disappearing without any news for a few days would scare the girl to death. So he was used to go to a new place to report that he was safe. How is it? Have you confirmed that you found the place? Yin Nuashing's eyes flashed across the endless starry sky. They were directly teleported into a world of light. His eyes were fixed in front of him together with Hui and Yin Nuashing. Yes, it's here. I remember this aura very clearly. The little girl nodded, and her expression was a little strange. But at least hundreds of millions of years have passed, or even billions of years. Why is it still like this? I don't feel any change. The aura of time is fixed at about 13 billion years, about the same age as this world of light. Wait a minute. We look at the thing in front of him, but his eyes flashed. There's another time axis hidden under this thing. Look, that seems to be its own time axis. The time this time axis reveals is more than 55 eras. Yun Nuashing answered the question on behalf of him and let out a long breath. It's about the same time as the new history of the Yuan realm. Hui and the little girl were silent. They didn't think much of it when they heard it just now, but now they felt that it was really a little strange. Yun Nuashing's gaze slowly moved from the cold, starry sky to the front and roughly looked around. This was a stellar system with a decent aura of life. The outer circle was shrouded by a thin layer of gas clouds, like a layer of barrier that separated the inside from the outside. There were a total of 8 planets and a star of moderate size. Excluding 2 small guys that were too close and 4 big guys that were too far away, there were still 2 planets that could be chosen as the habitat for life. However, one of them was an orange-red star that was ranked 4th. It was far away from the sun and was not very suitable for ordinary people to live in. However, it was not impossible to set up a nest there. Separated from it by a ring of rubble, the star that was closer to the sun happened to be in the most suitable range. It was also the place where the aura of life in this stellar system gathered. It was also the destination of their trip, a small blue planet that had the most brilliant colors and the most precious aura of life in this starry sky. Was nearly 80% of its surface was covered by the blue ocean, shrouded in clouds and fog. From afar, one could not see the ups and downs of the land, only yellow, green, and green. Heavy ice and snow with the heavy aura of hundreds of millions of years covered its extreme south and extreme north, like a guard. Well, I really can't think of too many words. He snapped his fingers and interrupted the chanting stage. When he saw Yun Nuashing and the little girl looking at him, he could not help but laugh dryly. I have seen too many planets with life. I have seen all kinds of strange models and normal models. You want me to look at a planet that alternates blue, white, green, and yellow? Well, it's too normal. There's nothing special to say. Can we skip this step? Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes. There was no such step in the first place. The 3 of them approached a little from the distant starry sky. Perhaps because they had gone around the angle, they saw a gray-white sphere appearing behind the blue star. It was probably the satellite of this star. Its surface was bumpy, and there were many scars on it. There were a series of scars left by it when it took the beating for its home planet. Judging from the aura on the surface, it was slightly older than its home planet. Hey, Feng, look at that gray-white sphere. It also has 2 timelines. One is following the flow of time, and the other is like the blue star. It is hidden by itself. The 2 timelines are the same. The blue star and its companion star have the same timelines. Yun Nuashing could recognize it with a casual glance. Then, under Hui and the little girl's gaze, she slowly raised her hand and slammed it down on the blue star in the distance. Ka! This star region trembled because of the slap, which made Hui and the little girl feel a toothache. Just when they thought that the tragic scene of annihilation and destruction was about to erupt, they saw that this starry sky was so quiet that there was no movement at all. There was no radiance in all directions, and there was no earth-shattering scene. However, they did hear a ka sound just now. They subconsciously thought that it was the sound of the starry sky shattering. Look at that star. Yun Nuashing stretched out her hand and pointed at the blue star. Faint energy threads appeared on its surface, as if they were attached to the star and drew a trace around it. That is the self-defense left behind by the imprint. When it is fatally threatened, it will automatically reveal itself and then turn into a barrier that encompasses the entire star. We nodded. Look, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple energy threads. There are a total of 10 to 20 barriers. Your slap just now made them feel a fatal threat and jump out to block it? Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. It was just a casual slap to make them reveal themselves. If it was a fatal threat, they would have already counterattacked. Okay. Hui smiled bitterly. He scratched his head and stared at the star below. His gaze shifted along the energy light spots that wandered around the energy threads. After a while, he withdrew his gaze. His face was full of confusion. It is indeed a divine imprint, but why? This is the third elemental realm. Why would there be divine imprints in the third elemental realm? Moreover, they're in a state of overflowing energy. They are not suppressed by the origin heavenly God's protection. Some of the imprints are very old, and some seem to be left behind in this era. We continued to look and scratch his head. Phone, how small is the probability of people from the third elemental realm going to the fourth elemental realm? The probability of life in the upper realm is not small. No, the probability of life in the middle realm being able to go to the fourth elemental realm is not small. However, they need a certain amount of luck. As long as they can endure for a long time, they will naturally find a chance to go to the fourth elemental realm. Yin Nuashing replied. Then what if they break through the barrier of the elemental realm and go to the fourth elemental realm by themselves? That's nonsense. Then what if people from the third elemental realm go to the eighth elemental realm? Hui crossed his arms and gestured with his hands. The third elemental realm busied themselves for most of their lives and went to the fourth elemental realm. The fourth elemental realm struggled to go to the fifth elemental realm. The fifth elemental realm crawled to the sixth elemental realm. Then they repeated the process twice and finally arrived at the eighth elemental realm. What do you think of this scenario? Yin Nuashing glanced at him. You're joking with the void. Hui pointed at the blue planet in front of them. Look, isn't there a void joke in front of us? Yin Nuashing and the little girl. That was indeed a void-level joke. They could not deny it. There must be a reason for this. A joke on the level of the void. As for the reason that was so complicated to the point of playing with probability with the void, Yin Nuashing shrugged. Let's go down and take a look. Maybe we can see something. Chapter 1750. The sky blue color rapidly approached in his eyes. The dark starry sky in the corner of his eyes was quickly replaced by the figures of all things in the world. The wind that blew past his ears was like a sharp wind blade with a subtle aura. In front of his eyes, through layers of white clouds, fell from the sky. The sea below gradually turned from a flat pattern into a three-dimensional object. The traces of life on the earth gradually became clear in his sight. He suddenly blinked his eyes and looked at his palm in confusion. Colorful lights constantly appeared on his body, and a huge amount of energy gushed out from his soul. Foam! I feel that the seal seems to be loosening little by little. The power of the Yuanshi realm is slowly recovering. The shocking words made Yin Nua startled. The three figures falling from the high blue sky stopped abruptly in midair. He looked down at the entire blue star from high up in the sky, and his gaze became a little strange. He pressed his chest a little unnaturally. I seem to have this feeling too. It's the problem of the rules of this star. The little girl stood on the clouds and looked down at the entire land. Her grayish-blue eyes lit up slightly. Although I haven't completely seen through it, I seem to feel that the rules of this star are, independent of the void, not affected by the rules of the void. Yin Nuashing was stunned. He looked at the sky and thought for a moment. Then he shook his head. No, not exactly. If I have to say, it should be similar to the realm of the gods. Although it is in the void, because of its own rules or other reasons, a considerable degree of its rules are self-contained. Only a small part of them flows with the rules of the void. It is the same type as the realm of the gods. However, in terms of degree and level, it is much inferior to the realm of the gods. Moreover, this rule seems to only be effective in the realm of the three elements. As Yin Nuashing spoke, energy began to gather in the palm of her right hand. After a while, a grayish-white energy chain as thick as a baby's arm appeared in her palm with a clang. It's probably this rule. Look, it can only take effect in the 3-element realm. If it's used in the 8-element realm, it will be useless. Of course. After all, this is the 3-elemental realm. Although I don't know why this. We looked down at the earth and the many traces left behind by life and fell silent for a while. Strange worlds can survive. But no matter how special it is still under the control of the void of the 3-elemental realm. Throwing it into the 8-elemental realm. No, it shouldn't be a problem to throw it into the 8-elemental realm, right? Hui was stunned by his own words. Only then did he notice Maple's strange expression. Maple, you mean if we throw this 3-elements realm into the 8-elements realm, it will explode? Yin Nuashing nodded and waved his hand to disperse the energy chain. The part of the rules that this star is connected to the void is all to lock itself in the 3-elements realm. It's different from other normal worlds. If other worlds were to cross over, they would at most encounter earth-shaking ruled turbulence. If this star were to go over, the rules would completely collapse within a minute and turn into ashes. It was not particularly difficult for a world to cross over. From the beginning to the end, it was just a change in the rules. It was just digging up the roots and continuing to take root in a new place. There was no difference. Unless the world structure was too weak, it was basically impossible for it to be destroyed immediately after changing places. The star in front of him might be a special model. After looking around, I've confirmed that there aren't any energy imprints above the heavenly God realm. It seems like these life forms that ran out of this star, for some reason, have all stopped at the heavenly God realm. We looked up at the sky and said, after a moment, "What about the world core? It's hidden. I don't know where it's hidden." Hui touched his chin and pointed at a place. 10 seconds ago, I saw it in that direction. After a while, it turned to another place, and now, you see, even its shadow is gone now. It probably sensed that we were looking for it and is trying to find a way to get rid of our attention. Yin Nuashing was speechless. A world core with long legs running around. This is also very impressive, and it doesn't seem to be running around in the concept layer of rules, but wandering around in a certain layer of space in the real world. What? Wandering around in the real world? These days, people can't even live in the concept layer of rules anymore. They have to stay in the mortal world to get some smoke and fire to survive in that dark place. It's not incomprehensible. What the hell? It's incomprehensible. Speaking of which, why is there a world core running around in the real world? It ran away again. I just felt its aura. We suddenly turned around and pointed at the other end of the ocean. He scratched his head helplessly. Did that guy really feel that we were looking for it? So, it has been changing its position and hiding for fun? Yin Nuashing reached out and knocked Huey's head. You're the one who is fooling around. The power of the Yuanshe realm has recovered to 50%. Can't you find where that little thing is hiding? It's someone else's territory, right? And this is the 3-yuan realm. We could just casually release an aura. We spread out his hands, and his expression became slightly solemn. After a few seconds of silence, he smiled bitterly. Do you believe that the whole starry sky will explode in the next second? Yin Nuashing's face twitched a few times. This was the truth. In fact, it would have been better if they had not inexplicably recovered their power. Now, for some reason, the protection of the heavenly God of origin had lost its suppressive effect on them. Then, with a heavenly God of origin who was on the verge of high level, a peak pseudo-origin, and a consciousness whose existence concept was equivalent to half of the void of the 8-yuan realm, the three of them could casually tremble. The three of them looked at each other and looked up at the starry sky at the same time. Then, they looked down at the ground. After a while, they turned around and used millions of layers of energy, rules, and chains of order to tie themselves into a huge dumpling that was 20 feet long. When they felt that their aura had been adjusted to a suitable level, they breathed a sigh of relief. But this blue planet is actually a mortal world. I thought that with such special and strange characteristics, it should be a world similar to our world. I didn't expect it to be, too ordinary. We looked down at the earth below with his hands in his pockets. His eyes fell on the traces of life. If he did not deliberately let his eyes look closer and only look down with his eyes, the traces would only be big enough to attract attention when they were connected. When he looked closer, he found that the large traces were all pieced together by many independent individuals of different sizes. The mountains and fields in the city forest, the cities and the wilderness, the rivers and the forests. These traces left from ancient times were integrated with the new creations created by those lives. Far and near were constantly changing and switching, but it was not abrupt at all. It's just that the air is a little smoky. The energy is thin. Among billions of lives, there are not many figures with hidden energy traces. The energy level of this mortal world is so low that it's outrageous. When I sneeze, the energy left here is hundreds of times more than the energy of this planet. Even the lower plane of the 3-yuan realm should not be so depleted of energy, right? Hui coughed twice, frowned and fanned in front of his nose. And the smell of the mortal world is so heavy. It seems that there are not many places that are particularly clean. You just said that it's a mortal world. Isn't it normal for the smell of the mortal world to be heavier? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and could not help but frown. It's indeed quite smoky. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at Hui. Are you done? Why are you still sealing yourself? Hui looked at the tens of millions of layers of thick seals on his body and did not know whether to laugh or cry. I can't help it. I'm close to the high level of the Yuansha realm. It takes some time for me to seal myself. After waiting for another 2 minutes for the Yuansha realm troublemaker to finish sealing himself, the three of them landed on the ground. Hui hurriedly looked at the landscape in all directions as he landed. His eyes were almost shining with golden light. Yin Nuoxing did not expect him to be so interested in the man-made landscape produced by these lives. He was not so happy when he was in the 8-yuan realm. Although it's a mortal world, the things in the mortal world are really beautiful. Look at the level, look at the scale, look at the traces that symbolize blood, sweat, and desperation to break free from the shackles. The traces created by life are so beautiful no matter when I look at them. After staying in a void for a few eras, looking at the dark void and those things that are neither human nor ghost every day, my head hurts. Look at these are the things that people look at. I'll look at that building, look at that garden, look at that mountain, that water, it's really boom. He fell from the sky at a speed of a few miles per second and smashed heavily on the ground. The ground immediately cracked open, forming a pit with a diameter of hundreds of feet. Billowing smoke and gravel soared into the sky. The cracks on the ground looked like the corpses of hundreds of giant centipedes. It was really a headache. Yin Nuoxing and the little girl fell to the side, speechlessly. Looking at the guy who had crashed into the ground, they could not help but fall silent. It's fine if this guy is just looking at the scenery, but when he's falling from a high altitude and his eyes are looking around randomly, he doesn't even look forward. Instead, he directly crashed into the ground. What should they do with this pit? Come out, you silly girl. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at the bottom of the pit. Someone's coming. If you don't want to be stared at by the people here, quickly run away and move. Fortunately, they were in the wilderness. If they were to rush into a city with tall buildings, they would probably smash through a lot of buildings. Hui awkwardly climbed out from the center of the big pit and scratched his head. I was fascinated. He hurriedly slipped away from the crater. After a few flashes, he was already several hundred meters away. Only when he was far away did he hear frightened voices coming from behind. Some people had already surrounded the crater. Half of them were doubtful, while the other half were calm. They circled around the crater and pointed at it, as if they were going to come up with something. Yin Nuoxing did not have the nerve to go up and tell them that a certain someone had smashed his head into the pit. She was afraid that it would scare them. Although we rushed down without a care. Where are we going now? Yin Nuoxing subconsciously opened her mouth and asked, causing Hui and the little girl to be surprised. This observer of the celestial realm, who did things hastily, was brave, resourceful, and opinionated and instantly set up the 5 eras plan. Now, she was actually asking them where they were going and what they were going to do. Speaking of which, weren't you looking for this world? Don't look at me like that. I have not been to this kind of. Yin Nuashing looked around. Low energy level world. Although I have been curious about this world for a long time and wanted to come here, when I came here, I felt that it was just like that. Excluding the strange rules and abnormal factors, it seems like an ordinary mortal world. There is nothing too special about it, and for the time being, I can't find anything too special. Well, it was too normal and did not feel special. He did not know how the name, Abyss of 10,000 Spirits, was spread. Before he came here, he thought that there would be all kinds of things that were not good, but when he came in and took a look, well, it was a normal world. Perhaps the name, Abyss of 10,000 Spirits, was actually created when they crashed into those barriers and died. What did you do when you came to these places in the past? Yin Nuashing tilted her head and looked at Hui. This. Hui raised his head and thought for a while. He waved his finger a few times. Eat, drink, and play. Anything else? Nothing else. Don't tell me you still expect to find something in this kind of world, like fighting or something? Hui chuckled and reached out to pat Feng on the shoulder. If you can't find anything unusual for now, then don't look for it. Come, walk around here with me and have some fun. It's not easy to come to the mortal world. Just treat it as a holiday for yourself to relax and relieve your stress. The Void Frontline is still fighting over there. The underworld is suffocating in its nest, and its claws have reached out to the other 7 primordial realms. You're telling me to have some fun. Hui slapped his hand over Feng's mouth and dragged him forward on the street. All right. It's been a day and a half, and it's rare to come here. I remember that you have not been to this kind of world before. Just treat it as a trip to broaden your horizons. Okay? Yin Nuashing was silent for a long time, thinking over and over again. Looking at Huey's passionate and occasionally playful little eyes, she sighed helplessly. The latter immediately understood that she had compromised. So, Yin Nuashing waved his hand and brought the 2 of them to the nearest city. The 3 of them moved in a mighty manner. After all, the 3 of them were big killing machines in the entire Dayuan realm. They were mobile sources of disaster. Yin Nuashing was really worried that the 2 of them would go boom, crack, bang, or something like that. She did not know if the 3 primordial realms could withstand a beating. Well, it was not that she could not understand Huey's crazy behavior. After all, she had been at the Void Frontline for a few eras, killing and rampaging nonstop. Few, but they were not the only ones risking their lives over there, even though they risked their lives more than anyone else. Well, she just felt a little apologetic about running out to have some fun when the entire Void was still in chaos. In the past, going to other worlds in the Void was a business trip to look for fragments. But now, she was openly slacking. All right, Feng, you'll go crazy if you continue to force yourself. If you go crazy, we won't be able to fight this war anymore. Seeing Feng's silent and contemplative look, Hui patted him on the shoulder and sighed. When we were still at the front line, you don't know how many people asked me to persuade you to rest for a while. You're the only one who didn't take yourself seriously. Your CU and Xing Huang almost cried because of this, you know? Well, now Yin Nuashing really had nothing to say. Hui grinned and turned his head. Then he was stunned. He had just found a random alley and teleported out. Then, without saying a word, he walked towards a bustling street. He excitedly rushed into the street and was surrounded by 3 handsome men and women who did not look like normal people. They had the temperament of gods and were wearing clothes that did not fit in with this world. In a short while, they were surrounded by 3 layers of people inside and outside. Young man, your clothes are really good. Han costume or Tang costume. The fabric is really good. Look, it's so tight, and it must be very comfortable to wear. Which shop did you buy it from? Sister, your earrings are really beautiful. Where did you buy them? The whole family looks like models. They even deliberately wore ancient costumes. Ah, are they shooting an outdoor scene? Is there a photographer hiding nearby? Excuse me, sir. Can I take a few photos of your family? Your daughter is so cute. I'm so envious. Yin Nuashing and the other 2. It's over. They felt that there were a lot of things to complain about in this chatter, but they did not know whether to complain or clarify. They did not know whether they were going crazy or these people were going crazy. But if they were surrounded by people again, they really felt that they would go crazy. We saw Feng's face turning gray at a speed visible to the naked eye. Cold sweat gushed out his forehead. He quickly stood in front and said, "No, no, no, he's that. Please move aside. Don't flash, don't flash. Please move aside. Don't pull my hair. It's really not clipped. Phone, move aside." The three of them disappeared at the other end of the street amidst the noise and the frequent flashes of light from a large group of passersby. Well, do you think this? Well, is it fun? So you like this kind of thing? You like to be surrounded by a large group of people? In a small park with not many people, Yin Nuoxing's face was gray. His luxurious windbreaker that represented the realm of the gods was pulled a little crooked. He collapsed on a bench in the park and could not help but mutter. The little girl beside him was still tugging at her messy dress and hair. Huey's face was full of dry laughter. He was hiding behind the bench and laughing dryly. I was careless. We just came out for a stroll, and it was equivalent to a god descending to the mortal world. We didn't change our clothes or disguise ourselves. I forgot. We laughed dryly. However, it seems that some things can't be covered up. Putting that aside, just by looking at his long, black hair that reached his waist, his robe that looked like a splendid outfit, and Feng's long hair that almost reached his ankles, he didn't look like a man's exquisite face. He looked like a 16-year-old girl wearing the most gorgeous clothes to get married. Forget it. He couldn't continue. Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and glanced at him. A family of 3, right? Why do you look so happy? No. We could not help but laugh bitterly. After all, Feng's appearance. Everyone at the Void front line knew and was used to it, but he did not expect to be treated as, well, let's not talk about it. If he mentioned foam again, he would go crazy. Little star, do you want me to dress you up? In the spiritual world, the little angel and Frost were laughing crazily because of the scene just now. At this moment, they were still holding their stomachs and laughing out loud in the mansion. Yin Nuoxing glared at the 2 girls with a black face. He already looked like a girl without dressing up. No one would think that he was a man when he walked on the street. If he dressed up, TSK, forget it. He did not dare to think about it. Frost continued unhurriedly. Do you want clothes? I have a lot here. Yin Nuoxing was so anxious that he wanted to stomp his feet. Can we talk about something else? The little girl watched the 2 of them complain and could not help but sigh. She tugged at her grayish-blue long hair and said faintly, "Should I change my appearance? After living for dozens of eras, I did not expect to be treated as a child one day. It's just a matter of appearance." We laughed bitterly. But that's not right. Have you never been treated as a child? If you go out like this, people will worry about whether you can cross the road in peace. The little girl looked at him and sighed. I haven't seen many people, and I have never been to the mortal world. Plus, I don't have the aura of a normal life. In short, no one who has seen me will really treat me as a child because of my appearance. We continued to laugh bitterly. This was the mortal world. Compared to their essence, existence, rules, and all kinds of characteristics, the mortal world was more superficial. With her appearance as a little girl and Feng's appearance, it was obvious from the passersby's reaction just now. I just said it once. Anyway, we stood up abruptly and patted away the grass roots and dust on his butt. He turned his head and looked at Yin Nuoxing. The 2 of them waved their hands and said, if we want to integrate into this world, we have to tidy up our... He gestured himself from top to bottom. Our clothes and appearance have to be tidied up. Otherwise, when we go out, it will definitely be like just now. Foam, take off your clothes. Yin Nuoxing, your clothes do not look like those of the mortal world. You will attract the attention of half the city wherever you go. If you don't want to be surrounded by people, hurry up and change your clothes. Hui waved his hand. By the way, cut your hair. Yin Nuoxing straightened her hair and threw it at Huey's face angrily. Cut. You cut. I haven't cut this damn hair for a few eras. Cut it for me if you can. Hui and the little girl. Wait a moment. Yin Nuashing suddenly shouted. Leave half for me. Don't cut it all. Hui. Chapter 1751. Mortal World was the name given to some of the worlds in the lower four realms of the Dayuan realm. It referred to those worlds where the laws were not strong enough, or where the laws were not complete, resulting in most of the life forms being ordinary people. There was no clear ratio for this most, nor was there a definite number. Generally, judging whether it was a mortal world was judged from the concept of laws. Most of them were gathered in the lower planes, but there were also some in the upper and middle planes, just that there were fewer of them. Generally speaking, such worlds were born in the void and were like that. However, there were also some worlds that were not like that at the beginning. They might have a decent energy concentration at first, and the laws of heaven and earth were strong enough. As time passed, the laws of heaven and earth fluctuated but basically stabilized. Then, one day, the energy level of the world began to fluctuate. After hundreds of millions of years, or even millions of years, it finally became a mortal world. That was the situation on a macroscopic level. In detail, it could be a problem with the world core. Most of the time, it was a problem with the world core. For example, the world core was born with such a standard. As for the latter, well, it was nothing more than the winds and waves in the void affecting the world core. In the end, the strength of the void was insufficient, causing an originally normal world to become an abnormal world. It was an overall, wide-scale downgrade. As for such things in the void, it was hard to say. After all, in the lower four realms, the number of life forms that knew the concept of the void was not more than 1%, or even less than half of 1%. Among them, the protoss of the various primordial realms accounted for a portion of that 1% and half of 1%. As for the number of life forms that clearly knew the void and could roam the void, well, it would be reduced by 10,000 times. They definitely existed, but their numbers were extremely small. Of course, even if there were 1 in a million, there were still 100 of them. Given the data, the more accurate situation in the void would be as follows. Out of 100 million races, only 100 races could challenge the void. That would be much clearer, and it was simply a little exaggerated. There were many forms of life in the void, and humans could be considered another race as long as they followed the rules of life to a certain extent. However, it was not that easy to gather 100 million races, and even the gods would have to spend a lot of time to search for them while roaming the void. Moreover, even if they managed to gather 100 races, they would not really be able to roam the void without a care in the world. That 100 was just a qualification. After all, it was just theory and data. What stood in the way of theory and data was the probability phenomenon known as the void. If it was really unhappy, it could simply wipe out 20 races, sneeze another 20, shudder another 20, and throw the remaining 40 into the same void region. Once they emerged from their own worlds, they would fight against each other, and then 39 would be gone. That would be quite exciting, digression. Anyway, that was how it was. Most life would be trapped in their own worlds if nothing unexpected happened. As for the void, which was a higher level of life, they were completely unaware of the divide between the higher levels. And as long as they did not know about it, they would always be subject to the laws of their own worlds. That was the general situation of the mortal world. Although that was what he said, he did not mean to belittle the mortal world. On the contrary, he quite liked the sights and gadgets created by the little life in the mortal world. Regardless of which world it was, life had its own way of living. Just like the mortal world had its own way of living as well. They stood at a very high position and had their own responsibilities, slapping the chaos, the void, and the power of chaos as if their lives depended on it. As for the beings living below, they naturally had their own disputes and lives. It had nothing to do with nobility or lowliness, but was simply the result of the birth of the void. Well, as long as there was no problem with the void and the 8 primordial realms were still isolated from each other, there would be no problem with that statement. If one day, that would probably not happen, then there was no need to worry. Let's not talk about the void and the rules. This mortal world seems to be developing quite well. Hui raised his head and blinked at Maple beside him. He then said through the soul transmission, "It's quite exciting, especially this 100, 200. It's the fastest development in the past 2 to 300 years. It's a leap in development that transcends an era." Upon hearing that, Yin Nuoxing also raised her head from the rapidly flipping book and said thoughtfully, "I remember the world of Navira." "Huh? Who is it?" "A friend of mine." Yin Nuoxing stuffed the book back into the bookcase and opened another book. She flipped through 20 pages in a second, never forgetting anything she saw. She muttered future acquaintance in her heart and said indifferently on the surface, although his world did not develop from the mortal world, the route it took had reached the extreme of the mortal world. After all, it's in the 8 primordial realms. Huh, what is the extreme of the mortal world like? Hui muttered curiously. Sailing ships in the void. The ships are strong and the cannons are sharp. You can casually pull up a fleet of tens of millions of soldiers and execute divine judgment in front of someone else's door. Wait, this is a bit exciting. Speaking of which, does sailing ships in the void refer to that kind of transport ship? It looks like a ship, or it doesn't even look like a ship, but it's still called a ship by its name. It can be used to open people's heads. It's much more advanced than that kind of transport ship. Yin Nuoxing replied indifferently as she changed to another book. The development path of this world is the same as the world of Navira. It broke away from the promotion, advancement, evolution, sublimation, and other changes of most worlds in the void. It reached a point where it could stand alone outside of the Vientiane and not be afraid of the void. It embarked on a different path, but it's just as exciting. The sound of Yin Nuoxing flipping the pages of the book suddenly paused. She opened the book and pointed at the content on it for Hui to see. What's an atomic bomb? It's quite interesting. Let me see. It's fission fusion. Oh, I seem to understand. Hui, don't look. Don't look. This thing is not interesting. What are you doing? Put down your hand. Stop your dangerous thoughts. Do you want to blow this place up? Yin Nuoxing shrugged. A burst of energy light between her fingers slowly extinguished. I've tried it. It's a pretty good way to release energy. It's quite powerful for the life of this world. But if it's placed in the stars or the void, this level of energy is not even comparable to the burp of a planet. Hui smiled bitterly. Turn it over, turn it over. Don't talk about this stuff. Well, it's true. With the current development of this planet, it's still too early to master this kind of power. The time is too short and the steps are too big. Fortunately, it's in the hands of some people who can master it. Yin Nuoxing yawned and put the book back in place. This was a library in a certain city. Perhaps it was a weekday morning, so there were not many people in the huge library. The row of seats near the window was illuminated by the bright sunlight. Although there were comfortable tables and chairs, no one was willing to sit there. They would rather lean against the bookshelves, sit on the wooden seats between the bookshelves, or sit on the ground, flipping through the books in their hands. It was quiet. There were only a few whispers between friends, conversations between the front desk staff and customers, and occasional suppressed, dry coughs in the corner. As for why they came to the library, Yin Nuoxing, Hui, and the little girl, the three of them began to wander aimlessly on the street after carefully dressing up. The so-called carefully dressing up was just a change of clothes. Hui tied up his hair, which was unusually long for men, so it didn't look that long. Then, he changed into a white casual outfit. Yin Nuoxing, well, it could be considered a more ordinary windbreaker, but her long, colorful, ankle-length hair could not be tied up at all. There was also no way to tidy up her changed appearance, so she simply left her hair untouched. The little girl also changed into clothes that were suitable for this world, so she didn't look so sensational anymore. They continued to walk on the street, wanting to find a place full of information about this world. After eliminating the method of pulling out the heart of the world and violently reading the information, they came to the library and began to flip through the dazzling collection of books. Although it was impossible to cover all the history of the entire planet civilization just by looking at the place where the books were stored, through the books, They could already see most of the things that the life on this planet had done in recorded time. This was even more so for major events. Of course, the records could also be skewed. Astrology, history, nature, science, energy, technology, scholarship, ancient literature. That should be about it. Hui subconsciously wanted to snap his fingers and throw the stack of books on the small wooden cabinet back. However, after thinking about where he was, he put the books back one by one. However, these are all things that can be displayed on the surface. Things that can be accepted by ordinary people belong to the surface. There are still many products hidden in the dark that can't be exposed. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and glanced at him as she calmly changed the books. There are also things that belong to the dark side in the divine realm. It's normal. Rather than saying that those things are hidden, the more important reason is that there is no need for others to know about them. This part of the information, this part of existence, is not very useful other than causing some unnecessary chaos. Those who are in a certain position will naturally come into contact with those who belong to that position, except for special circumstances. Hui nodded in agreement. What do you think those special life forms in the dark are doing now? He could not help but grin. Even if this planetary civilization had embarked on a different path, there were some life forms in the dark that possessed high energy. Oh no, the path was different, that possessed, not weak power. Yes, he was sure of their existence, but to find them, he had to first analyze the energy used by this planet, and he meant the power. What? Yin Nuoxing raised her eyebrows. You want to have some fun? Hui nodded with a smile. Yin Nuoxing gently closed the book and looked to the west. That's easy. We are now in a place called Huaxia. Go out and walk all the way to the west. There's a small area there, and there are many countries there. There are big and small wars there. Maybe we can meet one or two life forms with special powers. Why does it sound a little awkward? As for those life forms, the little girl raised her head from the book and looked at Yin Nuoxing. I have a way to find them. Other than the god of origin, no one in the great Yuan realm had been to more worlds than her. In places that had little to do with the energy system, the two of them might need some time to find those special life forms. But for her, those people with special powers were just as eye-catching. After all, she had already seen life forms with similar levels in similar worlds. It was easy to find them. Oh, Hui turned his head with interest and grinned at the little girl. Where? Where? I'll catch one or two to play with. There are a few over there. The little girl raised her finger and pointed to the front. She said faintly, they are gathering power. It seems, you will soon, boom. There was a sudden explosion without warning, followed by a shockwave. The glass windows of the library exploded into flower petals under the strong impact. The petals splashed out like sharp knives. A scorching aura rushed into the library on the third floor together with a burnt smell. At the same time, the huge impact sent the bookshelves and more than a dozen figures near the windows flying. The three of them, who had long been sensitive to energy, released a weak energy at the same time, pressing the glass shards that were as sharp as knives to the ground. At the same time, a shockwave came unexpectedly, blowing their clothes and hair up. The people and objects around them all fell backward, and some even flew half a meter away. When the bookcase in front of them came crashing down, they reached out to hold it, and a large number of books came crashing down on them. Before the world could recover from the violent roar, there were dozens of screams in different tones that resounded throughout the entire library and the streets outside. The shrill sirens from the cars also joined the musical drama as accompaniment, and in an instant, the world became chaotic. The street outside the window was covered by billowing smoke. One after another, battered and exhausted people stumbled into the library. Specks of blood splattered on the dust-covered floor, which was particularly eye-catching. At the same time, the belated fire alarm of the library rang. I don't think this is our fault. We pushed the bookshelves in front of him away. Looking at the messy scene around him, he could not help but laugh dryly. God knows. Yin Nuoxing looked around and quickly walked to a collapsed bookshelf. He reached out and lifted the bookshelf up. The books that were under it were also scattered around. He reached out to push the books aside and carried a girl out. Probably because she was close to them, she only experienced the feeling of being drowned in a sea of books. Then, she was hit by the bookshelf. Blood dripped from her head and slanted across her beautiful face. The colorful energy was very light. It almost flickered, but it was quickly pressed down. Yin Nuoxing's face twitched. After thinking for a while, he changed to a pure white, no, a normal energy, and injected it into the girl's body. It healed the wound on her head and replenished her life force. He carried the girl and walked out. Anyway, let's get out of here first. The streets were noisy and chaotic. Thick white smoke that could not be dispersed covered the entire sky, obscuring one's vision. The people on the streets were in a panic and did not know where to run. They could only follow the crowd as they hurriedly passed by. In the distant sky, there was still a thick black smoke that could not be dispersed. It seemed to have solidified in the air. What a low-quality energy. Yin Nuoxing frowned. He raised his hand and subconsciously used his energy to wipe away the smoke. Wait a moment. If we make even the slightest noise, we will be invited for tea. Hui hurriedly waved his hand and looked at the black cloud falling scene. Anyway, let's save the girl first. The scene looks quite intense, but the actual range of destruction is not as large as we imagined. After being washed by the shockwave from 200 to 300 meters away, although the surrounding scene was messy, it could only be described as messy. Other than the cars that had stopped in an emergency and blocked the entire street, there was no more damage. They did not know what happened at the center of the explosion. I thought this would be a very harmonious place. The little girl's soft murmur fell into Huey's ears. He shook his head helplessly. How can there be such a good thing? There are bad things happening everywhere, especially in this place where there are obviously ordinary and extraordinary people coexisting, and the latter are obviously in the minority. There are more things that happen secretly, and once they happen, it will be even more troublesome. There are few people in high positions, so you feel that you are that way. Something like that, something like that. There are not many people on the street. The remaining people were still running in the direction away from the outbreak of the chaos. Yin Nuoxing and the others also hurriedly led people in that direction. On the way, they also pulled some people who were trapped by the chaotic scene and sent them to a safe place. Only then did they quicken their pace a little and go to the place where the chaos broke out, to join in the fun. However, they were obviously late. 5 to 6 minutes had passed since the explosion. When they glanced at the place where the black smoke was billowing, there was not much breath of life. In these 5 to 6 minutes, the scene had been quickly sealed off by a large group of heroic figures in uniform. Seems like we're late. Yin Nuoxing and the others looked at the center of the scene from a distance away from the blockade line. What they saw were the remnants of the explosion, the damaged buildings, and the people in uniform shuttling in the smoke. However, they could not find the culprit. They probably ran away. However, there were very obvious energy traces left behind. We looked at the scene and suddenly grinned. He patted Maple on the shoulder and pointed to a place. After that, he quickly ran towards the place where the energy traces led him to. Yin Nuoxing looked at someone's back speechlessly and sighed. What a playful guy. He wants me to be careful, but he also wants to get himself involved in the storm. I really can't understand this guy's way of having fun. More than 20 miles away from the library, which was already at the other end of the city, 3 masked figures slowly walked into an old alley filled with junk. They casually opened an iron door and went in. The smell of smoke and fire that had not completely dissipated from their bodies still lingered in the air. The old hut looked more like a narrow storage room. The 3 of them, together with a table, a bed, and 2 chairs inside, could not fit anything. There was an exquisite wooden box on the table. It looked like the surface of the box was scorched by fire. Before they could sit down in the room, a low laughter suddenly sounded. You guys are really fast. This is the thing that you guys want to get, even if it would cause a big news? The sudden low laughter made the 3 of them instantly stiffen. Their murderous aura skyrocketed. 2 of them pulled out the guns hidden behind their backs in an instant. One of them had a flaming fist in his hand. He did not hesitate to punch in the direction of the table. Then the three of them suddenly froze in an instant. Hui sat on the chair as if it was his own home. He looked at the three masked men who were still filled with murderous intent. Then he hummed a song and opened the wooden box on the table in front of the three of them. A brilliant but dim light leaked out from the wooden box. The wooden box was a stone about the size of a fist. It was dyed green and looked like a gemstone. However, the quality must be very poor. Oh, wait a minute. This should be a kind of gemstone called jadeite that they just saw. It should be a raw gemstone. It did not look like an ordinary gemstone. It had a very weak. Oh, wait a minute. It had a decent energy. Well, it was about the same level as the man with the flaming fist. What is this? We took the jadeite out of the box. He stood up and leaned over to press it on the face of the guy who burned him. What is this? What is this? What is this? Oh, I forgot that you're still immobilized. Hui scratched his head and waved his hand to remove the ability of the person in front of him. He repeated again, "What is this? What is this? You, how dare you stop? Forget it. I'm not interested in knowing. Anyway, it is not something good." Hui waved his hand and sealed the other person's mouth. The gangster was so angry that his whole body was trembling. "You are the one who asked what it was, and you are the one who did not let us speak. Moreover, if you are not interested in knowing, why are you chasing after us?" In the end, who is this person who suddenly came in? He had never heard of such a person here. "Hui, someone is coming. If you're done playing, hurry up and leave." Maple's voice sounded in his soul. Hui also smiled and nodded. He stood up and clenched his hands. "Although I don't know what you're playing, it is not right to set fire in the city. Those who do wrong must be punished. Woo woo. Woo." The gangster with the abnormal ability saw the white hand reaching for his head. His pupils shrank to the size of a needle tip. The aura of death burst out from the bottom of his heart and spread throughout his body. It was as if he was facing an indescribable ghost. The strong oppressive aura made his face almost turn white. An inhumane scream came from the soul transmission, causing Yin Nuoxing to be stunned for a moment. Standing at the top of a tall building and looking into the distance, he saw a large group of vehicles speeding over on the street below. They were approaching from all directions with figures with extraordinary strength. In less than a minute, they had surrounded dozens of streets in the surrounding area. Heavy firepower sealed off the area, making it difficult for people in this area to escape. Phew, Hui, this guy. What's he doing now? Yin Nuoxing put her hands in her pockets and sighed deeply. Chapter 1752. In the middle of the 56th era of the Dayuan realm calendar, in a certain world in the lower plane of the lower elemental realm or the tertiary elemental realm, a record was written on a blue living star in a corner of a small or medium-sized galaxy. It read, God knows how many years in the Earth calendar. I'm too lazy to remember, so I crossed it out. In a certain year, a certain month, a certain day, at a certain time, the Lord Guardian of the realm of the gods began to go crazy and inexplicably got involved in the disputes of ordinary people. The observer's note. Under the high blue sky. No, the weather was a little gloomy and gray. The sun was too lazy to care for the earth. On the other side of the city, more than 20 miles away, there were still ashes and black smoke that had not fallen in time, floating in the air, gradually spreading to the surroundings. From afar, it looked like a black hill, and several sounds of people cleaning up the scene could be heard from the other side. Back to the site in front of him, standing on the edge of the roof of an old 8-story building. The wind blew his long, colorful hair and short black windbreaker. A pair of bright eyes looked down at the black heavy vehicles that were constantly gathering below. They were specially made vehicles. Hundreds of vehicles carrying hundreds of murderous figures quickly sealed off this area of unknown name. The fastest vehicle that was rushing at the front suddenly stopped in the middle of this old street. The door was violently pushed open, and a line of figures in black clothes filed out. There was a figure with some power in that car. Yin Nuoxing had imagined that this person who appeared with a mighty lineup might be a young man with a cold expression who did not say a word, or a middle-aged uncle with a little beard and 2 or 3 scars on his face to tell a story, or a fiendish bald man, or even a guy who was armed to the teeth and whose face could not be seen. However, what he did not expect was that the person in charge who came out of the car was actually a tall and slender woman with a delicate and beautiful face who looked capable and shrewd. Maybe it would be better to call her a girl? She did not look old, just in her early 20s. Speaking of which, in a world where the average life expectancy was 70 to 80, a young person should look like that, right? He didn't understand. For an undying being who had lived for more than 10 great eras, his soul already crossing over 100 great eras, this question was just too difficult for him. The girl below, who was wearing a light blue jacket and trousers and had long hair that reached her waist, was not in a good mood. Although she looked calm on the surface, it was easy to see the anger hidden deep within her. Coupled with the fact that she had just jumped out of the car and was now rushing forward in a majestic manner, it was guaranteed that she was planning to cause trouble for some people. At this moment, if there were no accidents, she should be related to the boom 20 miles away. However, the person who was pressed down by Hui in the room was responsible for releasing the firecrackers, and she might be the one who released the firecrackers. Hey, it's done. Hui appeared beside him in a flash, smiling at him and the little girl with a relaxed and joyful face. Yin Nuashin glanced at him and then looked down. What did you do in there for so long? Well, I left something fun. Hee hee. Hui grinned and gave a thumbs up with a happy expression. The old and messy alley was quickly occupied by 4 or 5 bear-like burly men wearing sunglasses. The girl in blue quickly rushed to the front of the door and kicked open the iron door that weighed more than 100 pounds. The heavy impact resounded through the alley, and the iron door cracked open on the spot. Just as she was about to rush in, she was stunned by the scene in front of her. The 3 masked men were tied up with their backs, facing each other. They were thrown into the corner of the storage room like goods and passed out. On the table in front of them was the raw jade stone that had been stolen from her shop. On the wall in front of them, there was a sentence written in blood-stained, flame-like handwriting. That's right, we stole it, The girl in blue looked at the scene in front of her and was a little stunned. It seems that there is an expert who has taken the initiative to solve the problem for us. An old man in a black tang suit with white hair and beard walked forward and looked at the raw jade stone in the wooden box on the table. He nodded and closed the lid and handed it to the girl in blue behind him. The flame dragon stone is intact. Miss, please keep it first. Elder Zheng. The girl in blue nodded, and her cold eyes glanced at the line of words. Suddenly, she walked quickly to the corner and took off the masks of the 3 masked men. Her pupils trembled slightly. Elder Zheng, look at these 3 people. Isn't this person a well-known figure on the world's underground dark roll? Elder Zheng looked at the tall man in surprise. He looked at the man's hands, and there were obvious bloodstains on the tips of his index fingers. The burning words on the wall should be written by his hands. His meridians are broken. Although he is still alive, he can only be a cripple for the rest of his life. The girl in blue frowned and waved her hand to call the bodyguards outside. Tie them up and send them to the dungeon for interrogation. I want to see who is going against my Zhou family at this time. Elder Zheng, who do you think it is? The girl looked at the line of words and felt a little doubtful. Just as you think, I don't know which friend has this style. Elder Zheng knocked on his old waist and shook his head. Let's find a way to find him. He didn't leave his name or voice. He just left this. It feels like he's joking with us. Maybe it's a passing master. The girl in blue didn't take his words seriously. She nodded casually, turned around, and walked out of the storage room. Elder Zheng sighed deeply and was about to leave with the girl in blue. Suddenly, a voice sounded in their earphones. Miss, Elder Zheng, there are 3 unidentified people on the rooftop near you. How should we deal with them? Unidentified? The 2 of them looked at each other in confusion. Yes, and they seem a little strange. I can't tell what it is. More than 1,000 meters away, on the rooftop of a 20-story building, a sniper who was lying on the roof moved his eyes away from the scope and rubbed them hard. When he looked in a mirror again to look at the 3 people, the blurry feeling came again. He could barely see the three people standing there and looking at them, but it was very blurry, as if something was interfering with his vision. However, when he looked at other places, he didn't have the same feeling. Am I old? He smiled bitterly in his heart and began to think about retirement. After muttering in his heart for a moment, he focused on monitoring the target again. However, this time, the colorful figure who had been watching coldly from the sidelines suddenly glanced over, and their eyes met. At that moment, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Even the ferocious beasts he had encountered in the forest did not have such a ferocious expression. His breathing froze, and he almost fell back with his gun in hand. What the hell is that? Permission to snipe? Test the target? The voice that rang in his ears made him quickly recover from his fear and panic. He didn't even know if it was his Miss or Elder Zhang's order. He just followed the order and subconsciously squeezed the trigger. He aimed at the blurry figure that was emitting a colorful luster and slightly deviated from the position. Then, a roar that tore through the air clearly exploded in the air and rushed into the range of their senses, causing Hui and the little girl to turn their heads casually. The moment they turned their heads, an unknown thing that left a conspicuous white smoke in the air rushed past 1/2 meter in front of them. The late explosion covered the entire area. All the black-clothed figures seemed to have received a signal as they pulled out their guns and prepared for battle. They quickly found a place to hide and crept in the dark, releasing a dangerous aura like a poisonous snake. Oh, what's that thing? Huey's gaze followed the white smoke that slowly drifted to the ground below. The originally flat road had a hole that was less than 1/2 foot deep, and a wisp of white smoke was drifting out of the hole. A lethal weapon made by the locals. There was a faint white light in Yun Nuoxing's eyes as he slowly raised his hand. I've learned a little about it. It has a good armed force compared to a single person. The most important thing is that although it's a close-range attack, the senses and reaction of ordinary people are basically unable to react to it. It's judged to have a fatal lethality. Well, it seems quite interesting. Hui nodded. A distance of 1 or 2 kilometers was quite far for ordinary people. Well, I feel a little interested. The other party deliberately missed, as if he's testing something. He's been aiming at me for a long time just now. I don't know why he keeps staring at me. Anyway, I'll try to respond first. Testing. Hui scratched his head and was a little puzzled. We're just standing here. First, we didn't do anything. Second, we didn't do anything. What's there to test? Well, although we're surrounded by others, it's not like we can't do anything. Wait a minute, Phone, what are you doing? We felt that something was slightly wrong as he spoke. He saw Phone raise his hand for a while, making a bow and arrow action. He couldn't see the bow or the arrow, but he could feel an energy gathering. Of course, I'm returning the favor. Look at my posture. What else can I do? Hey, stop fooling around. Stop it. Hui was shocked. Once that weak energy burst out, even if he deliberately controlled it and suppressed the power, it would definitely release an unconcealable phenomenon within a radius of 100 miles. The power that stood at the top of order was definitely not something to be trifled with, not to mention the power of the natural order. The power of the natural order. Feng's body was used to reacting faster than his mind. His attack power was subconsciously added with the destructive power of order and the natural order. What do you want to do to this fragile, 3-elemental world? Fellow cultivator, please wait a moment. An anxious shout suddenly sounded from the street below. He didn't care whether it would attract the attention of the people living in this area. Anyway, be careful first, touch. Yin Nuoxing's hands that were pulling the bow gently. We suddenly pounced on him and pressed him to the ground. His loosened hand caused the energy arrow to change direction. The little girl also hurriedly used the void seal to weaken the power of the arrow. Although this attack wasn't strong under the deliberate control of Yin Nuoxing himself, and was weakened by Hui and the little girl one after another, this energy that was enough to distort space, and the void had already drawn a distorted energy trace in the air. Finally, it rushed straight to the top of the clouds and slowly disappeared. Let's go, let's go. Hui shouted loudly. He hurriedly pulled Feng to the other side of the building and fled in a panic. As he fled, he scolded in the soul transmission. Idiot! Idiot Feng! It's fine if I make a small commotion, but you made such a big commotion. Do you have to light fireworks to feel comfortable? Yeah, I didn't light it up. The three people of unknown origin hurriedly disappeared on the other side. Only then did Elder Zheng stand firmly against the wall in horror. His eyes were still filled with unconcealable fear and shock. Just the leaked energy made him a little breathless. This was under the condition that they were tens of meters apart. If they were facing each other head-on, he might not even be able to move. Who gave you the permission to attack? The whole process from the attack to the counterattack was less than 10 seconds. The girl in blue rushed out of the alley exasperatedly. After saying this subconsciously, she wanted to find trouble with the attackers. However, she was stunned. She looked at Elder Zheng, who was still frightened and had not retreated. Her heart was heavy. Other than them, who else could give the order to attack? Other than the few people from the Zhou family, there was no one else. Elder Zheng, those three people are... Elder Zheng shook his head lightly. I haven't seen them before. I also haven't heard of when there were three people of that level in this area. I'm afraid that they have reached a realm that doesn't belong to our era. A realm from a few years ago? The girl in blue was slightly stunned. Isn't that a realm that only exists in legends? How can there be such people in this world? You have to believe it. Elder Zheng knocked on his old waist and shook his head. The way the energy shook the space just now was a power that they could not reach in their lifetime. It was the first time he had seen such a power in his life. Fortunately, the other party didn't know what they were afraid of and didn't attack. Otherwise, we would be in trouble this time. In short, the first day of his arrival in this world ended just like that. It was a muddle-headed yet exciting day. He was unfamiliar with this place and had nowhere to go. For the time being, he couldn't find the next source of entertainment. He meant the purpose. He was still wandering aimlessly in this city in the middle of the night. The incident this morning had been reported on the news, reporting the damage caused and the casualties. Currently, the flat box that was placed in the TV was showing the scene of cleaning up the scene. The place that was destroyed was a shop called Zhou Dao that Hui Yao did not hear clearly. It seemed to be quite big. It was a chain store that spanned across provinces. It was said that there would be some activities in the near future. They even specifically mentioned the emerald stone that Hui Yao saw. The explanation to the public was that there was an explosion due to some malfunction, and the impact was huge. A natural gas pipeline explosion. Yin Nuashing added to Huey's soul message. A kind of energy, a pipeline that transmits energy. But you and I both know that this is just an explanation to the public. The real reason has been covered up. By the way, what happened to the person you caught? Oh, I just casually patted him. Hui pretended to wave his hand. That guy's strength seems to be pretty good. I see that the people walking around the streets are all ordinary people. With his strength, he can even threaten a city. No wonder that group of people had to use that level of strength to surround him today. Most of them are well-trained ordinary people, but they are still cannon fodder in the face of this kind of otherworldly power. Otherworldly power. Oh, that's a good way to put it. Huey's eyes swept left and right. He could not wait to take in all the dazzling scenes in the world. He tilted his head and looked at Maple, who was wearing a hat to cover his eyes. He poked his arm with a smirk and asked, "Where are we going tonight?" The little girl was stunned. If she guessed correctly, Yin Nuashing would definitely say whatever. Then, the initiative was back in Huey's hands. In that case, before the latter got involved in the next big news, or created a big news with his own hands, she quickly pointed to the side. "I think that's a good place. How about we go and have a look?" Yin Nuashing and Hui, who were about to casually respond, turned their heads when they heard that. On the bustling pedestrian street, people came and went, casting slender shadows under the streetlights. Suddenly, a 3 to 4 meter high stone archway appeared a dozen meters in front of them. The lights on both sides of the road illuminated the grayish-white stone pillars. It seemed to be a corner of the street. The atmosphere inside seemed to be different from the bustling road in front of them. It doesn't matter. Let's just walk around. Nuashing nodded and walked forward quickly. Maple, you seem to have something on your mind? Hui asked casually as he walked 2 steps to catch up with him. Nuashing had just nodded when Hui continued. If you're thinking about the void front line, then don't mention it. Nuashing's face twitched. That was indeed the case. However, since he said that he wanted to rest for a while, he would not admit it this time, even if he was beaten to death. So, he quickly looked ahead and made up a story. I feel that there's a heavy time aura inside. There might be something good inside. Where they walked past the stone archway, the buildings in front of them changed from those high-rise buildings to small houses and pavilions that were only 2 or 3 stories high. Even the floor tiles were paved with stones that were not particularly smooth. Long red ropes were hung between the 2 or 3 stories high buildings. At the intersection of 2 red ropes, square lanterns were hanging above the street to replace street lights to illuminate the stone street. On both sides of the street that was 7 to 8 meters wide, there were neatly arranged stalls. The hanging lanterns reflected the flickering images of people. It was very lively. This place makes me feel like I'm strolling at night in the realm of the gods. We could not help but laugh. Although it was a memory of several eras, it was still very clear. But the style and furnishings are poles apart. It looks like that, but it doesn't have the same taste. Nuashing tilted her head and was about to ask him if he was homesick when this guy rushed to a stall and waved his hand vigorously, not caring about the crowded environment around them. Maple, 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 come and look at this. Nuashing was speechless. Although they had more or less changed some of their characteristics, there was no way to change the essence of things. They were too lazy to forcibly change their form. This shout attracted half of the people on the street, and it was estimated that half of their eyes would not move away from them for a while, before the whispering crowd focused all their attention on them. Nuashing hurriedly lowered her hat, pulled the little girl, and ran forward for a while. Hui, who was looking at the toys at the stall, also exclaimed and quickly put down the things and ran away. After running for a while, Nuashing rolled his eyes and knocked on Huey's head with his fist. Don't worry about me. Hey, I like to be lively. You see, it's so lively here. Maple, you should live a livelier life too. You should be staying with the aura of the mortal world. Do you want me to find you a little girl or something? Let me give you half a minute. In the spiritual world, the little angel said faintly in the spiritual transmission, we already have 5 or 6 in our family. Don't make trouble for him. Hui was stunned. He patted his head and said, Oh, I almost forgot. Nuashing, these 2 guys definitely did it on purpose. Walking along this quaint street for a while, they could even see porcelain used to decorate crystals. Not far away, there's a lotus pond at a corner. There was an arch made of porcelain that was half a person's height. Looking from the place where they ran all the way to the inside of the arch, there was a lot of people coming and going. It seemed to be a popular gathering place in this pedestrian street. Wow, Maple, come and look at this. The things in this world are really interesting. Before we could calm down for half a minute, he exclaimed again and ran forward with a happy expression. He squatted down in front of an old man's stall that was full of all kinds of wooden carvings. Nuashing rolled her eyes and hurriedly followed. Hold it in. Don't make trouble for me. When the old man saw that there was a guest, he sat up straighter and adjusted the gray hat on his head. He smiled at Hui and said, Do you like wooden carvings? I carved them myself. Just take a look. When Hui was fiddling with the wooden carvings, the old man also looked at Hui and couldn't help but say, Young man, where are you from? You're so handsome. I'm from here. Master, how much is this wooden carving? Local? It doesn't sound like it from your accent. If you like the wooden carving, I'll give you a discount. 55 yuan will do. The little girl was suddenly stunned. She quickly pulled Nuashing and waited for him to come closer before whispering, Did you get the money of this world? Nuashing was stunned and sweated. The money of this world seems to be recorded. This can't be fake. We'll be invited by the local police for coffee. Both of them were stunned. They looked at Hui, who was happily chatting with the wooden carving master. Nuashing was silent for a while. She looked around and clenched her hands. Are there any hooligans nearby? I'll go and get some money. Hearing that, the little angel almost rolled off the bed. These two guys. The first way to get money in other people's worlds was either to sneak into alleys or find hooligans. They were indeed a match made in heaven, who had been through life and death situations for more than 10 years. Sometimes their ideas could even come together. Chapter 1753. In the back-and-forth conversation between the two of them, he had already made himself into a local, but he had gone to live in other provinces for many years and finally returned here. At the same time, he had also given himself a non-existent ancestral home. Spanning 3,000 years, he was just short of crossing the ocean. The two of them chatted happily, and the wood-carving master even lowered the price of the wood carving himself. Yin Nuashing felt that this might be considered as the cost of listening to the story and chatting with him. After all, the two of them had been chatting here for half an hour. He had already come back from the alley after being robbed, but these two fellows still had not finished chatting. If he did not know that it was Huey's first time here, he might have mistakenly thought that this old man was a child that he had left behind in the lower realm. This enthusiasm, this scene of them talking about everything like meeting a bosom friend on a high mountain and flowing water, stunned him and the little girl. If it were not for the other customers coming later, the two of them felt that Hui could still continue chatting here for half an hour. In the end, he used the money that he had hurriedly robbed from the stall to touch 3 wood carvings before it was considered to be over. You guys are really talkative. Yin Nuashing could not help but mutter to Hui, you guys read a lot of history during the day, and you use it to chat at night. If no one came, I think you guys could talk here for 2 days. Hee, we talked too much as we talked. We could not help but laugh. The old man was also a person with a story. He looked to be in his 70s or 80s, but his body was still very strong. He was full of energy and did not look muddle-headed. He even remembered the things that happened when he was young clearly, including the things that happened to him at that time. It was said that he had even fought on the battlefield. He saw that there were scars left on the old man's body, and it was said that they were left behind in the past. Oh, this is the currency of this world. Hui touched the red banknote he took from Maple and stared at the pattern on it repeatedly. Then he put it under his nose and sniffed it. He smacked his lips and said, it's a different smell of copper. This is the first time I've seen paper as currency. There are very few resources on this planet, so we have to use them sparingly in all aspects. As we have seen, the gold coins used in other worlds have long been eliminated, and the energy level here is also very low. Obviously, there won't be any energy currency here. After constant selection and improvement, we have chosen this path. Yin Nuashing took out a gold coin from the Pantheon world from his pendant and played with it in his hand. Oh, Hui answered casually. He took out a wooden carving he had just bought and placed it in Maple's hand. Here for you. Yin Nuashing subconsciously took it. When she saw the wooden sculpture clearly, her face twitched. It was a dragon with a wingspan of 1 foot. Why this? I randomly picked it. It looks fun. No matter how many times I look at a mortal's artwork, I still find it fun. Okay. Yin Nuashing fiddled with the wooden sculpture of the dragon. The wood was light and sturdy. Well, there was nothing special about it. It was just an ordinary wooden sculpture. Speaking of which, if there's a wooden sculpture of a dragon, does that mean this kind of life form also exists in this world? It's hard to say. As far as we know, there's no such life form. But it's said that there was another kind of life form known as dragon in the prehistory of this planet. Hui said. Another kind? Yin Nuashing looked at the wooden sculpture and said, it's not the other kind of lizard. Is it a long worm? No, it's not the 2 kinds we know. Hui shook his head and threw the part of the information he saw to Maple through his soul. Here, it's this kind. Yin Nuashing took a look inside, and her face twitched wildly. With the current level of development of life forms on this planet, there was no way to witness the prehistory with their own eyes. They use various methods of restoration and tracing bit by bit and finally restore the life forms that once existed. Although they were also known as dragons, something felt wrong. This kind of huge size and variety looked a little, it was just strange. These things called dinosaurs were all reptiles, but they didn't seem to be able to fly. Oh, there were some that could fly, but they had changed their names. Except for the head that looked different from the other kind of dragon he knew, the rest of them were quite similar. By the way, this is basically another species, right? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes hard. Oh, I think so too. But no matter what, they are still called dragons, aren't they? Hui replied with a grin. He casually looked at the stalls around him, feeling very interested. The two types of dragons that we know seem to be people's imagination instead. They're lives that only exist in legends and fantasies. Yin Nuoxing touched her hair thoughtfully. What do you think will happen if I touch a dragon here? It will be on the news. We gave her a thumbs up. Let's put this aside. In the country of Huaxia, where we are, there's also a saying that there are descendants of dragons and successors. Perhaps in their ancient history, there really was such a legendary life form that is now called fantasy. And this world still has obvious traces of evolution. It hasn't left the evolutionary period for too long, or maybe it hasn't finished evolving yet. Those legendary life forms may no longer be suitable for the environment of this planet that has evolved over a long period of time. They gradually disappeared in reality and died out. Huey's gaze fell on the passers-by. He said to Maple, "How is it? Do you feel the blood of dragons?" "I don't see it. We don't know what kind of aura the dragons on this planet look like. But there is no life form with a special bloodline around here. So, I speculate that even if there was one, it might have been washed away by generations of bloodline." Yin Nuoxing continued to twirl her hair. Suddenly, she said emotionally, "I really want to touch a dragon." Hey, stop. You want to make big news again. It's just a thought. I didn't bring. No, I don't know anyone from the dragon race. Then it's okay. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. Just as he was about to say that he didn't bring Bing, Air, and Little Qing, he subconsciously remembered that this was still the Dark Age. It was no wonder that he suddenly felt like floating. This mortal world reminded him of another place. Under the East Sea, the Furnace of Souls, the place where Ming and Little Purple Soul were once trapped. The world there was similar in style. Only the geographical location was different. Huey's eyes suddenly paused. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Maple's arm. Hey, look over there. Do you see the thing in that person's hand? It has traces of spiritual aura, although it's very weak. Yin Nuoxing looked over and saw a small stall surrounded by a few people. The stall owner was wearing a mask and holding a square wooden box in his hand. He shook his wrist and said to the people around him, "This is a real spiritual wood. It has a history of thousands of years. It can improve one's qi, nourish one's spirit, and prolong one's life. It's a family heirloom. If it wasn't for my family's financial difficulties, I wouldn't be willing to sell it. Cut the crap. Just tell me how much it is." The stall owner straightened his wrinkled clothes and calmly stretched out a finger. 1 million. Take it if you want. The people in front of the stall rolled their eyes and walked away. Hey, a broken stall can sell things for 1 million. Do you think this is an antique street? 1,000-year-old spiritual wood? Who knows if it's a scam? Hui walked over with a smile and said to the stall owner, "Boss, can I have a look at the thing in your hand?" The stall owner, who had just been shaking his head and sighing that no one knew what was good for him, suddenly raised his eyes and looked at Hui. He was stunned. This imposing appearance, calm and composed, coupled with this unfathomable temperament, this demeanor, this smile, this simple but not undignified clothes, this is a rich man. He took a deep breath and put on the best smile he could in his life. He held the brown wooden box with both hands and handed it forward. He immediately put on a flattering smile. "Hey, boss, please take a look. Let's not talk about other things in my stall. Only this spiritual wood is absolutely real. You won't be a loss if you buy it for 1 million. You won't be fooled by it. Look at this precipitated, natural, and exquisite pattern. Look at this plate of wrapped pulp. Oh no, look carefully and smell it. Don't you feel the abundance of spiritual aura? This thing is definitely worth the price." Yin Nuoxing and the other two smiled bitterly. They didn't know whether this thing was worth the price or not, but this thing had indeed undergone the precipitation of time and did indeed have a trace of spiritual aura. Hui flipped the wooden box in his hand and looked at it clearly. It was a solid square, not a box. The seam that was cut 2/3 of the way around was just a naturally formed pattern. He looked at it and felt it was like a box, but it was smooth and without any undulations. Phone, how much currency is 1 million? Hui muttered in his soul. Yin Nuashing touched the piece of red in his pocket. A thin piece of red banknote was 100. The thickness of 1 million. He put his hands together and slowly drew a height. Then, he rolled his eyes hard. No, I don't have money. I only have a life. Why? Are you interested in this thing? Hui smiled bitterly. I'm just a little interested. Well, let's find an alley and find some trouble with a few gangsters. Yin Nuashing and the little girl rolled their eyes at the same time. He had just walked around the alley and touched less than 1,000 yuan. If the little gangsters had money, they would not have come out to mingle. He sighed earnestly. If you want to find someone, you have to find those people who are at the top in the dark, right? The little girl. This is the rhythm of making big news again. Hui grinned and handed the spiritual wood to the stall owner. Boss, the stall owner's breath stagnated. He quickly glanced at Huey's subtle expression and was surprised to find that he couldn't see anything. However, according to his past experience, this rich second-generation big investor who looked bright and beautiful must have taken a fancy to this thing. However, he didn't have the habit of being a prodigal. He might feel that it wasn't worth it for him to directly take 1 million yuan. After all, this thing was only valuable in the hands of the right people. The person in front of him obviously just looked at it and thought it was fun. He was definitely not in the list. If he wanted to seize this opportunity, he could only... Boss! He held Huey's hand excitedly and smiled warmly. I won't hide it from you. Look at my stall, there's still some good things in it. If 1 million yuan is too much, how about adding these in? Hui was stunned. No, I just 900,000. 900,000. It can't be lower. At this moment, a person suddenly walked by and took the wooden cube in Huey's hand. He shouted to the stall owner, Boss, 2 million yuan. I want this thing. The stall owner was slightly stunned. He looked at Hui, who was still smiling and unhurried. Then, he looked at the newly appeared young man in a suit with his hair combed back and glasses. He looked refined, but his expression was obviously a little frivolous. Then, he looked at the former again and smiled bitterly. Boss! Hui tilted his head and looked at the young man with the two people. He slowly said, I don't 3 million. The young man put the thing in the hands of the bodyguards. He crossed his arms and looked at Hui with a frivolous smile. It's too troublesome to say that. How about this? You and I both know the value of this thing. Why don't you just give us an upper limit and save us all some time? Huey's eyes flashed. He tilted his head and quickly exchanged glances with the stall owner. After the latter understood, he smiled and looked at the young man. He said indifferently, 8 million. How about it? The young man turned around and raised his hand. The two bodyguards immediately carried 2 big boxes and turned to leave. 10 million. No need to waste time. Then, I'll take this thing away. Kid, let me warn you. If you don't have money, don't come to Taobao. After the young man and his bodyguards walked far away, Hui carried a box and smiled at the stall owner. Happy cooperation. Then he sighed. So straightforward. If I had known, I would have shouted more. The stall owner scratched his head and smiled bitterly. Boss, I see that you are quite interested in the spiritual wood. You don't look like someone who lacks money. Why would you give it to someone else? Oh, I'm just curious. It's nothing. I'm really just curious. Other than that, I don't have any other thoughts. Hui weighed the box and smiled. Besides, there's someone who's so stupid and rich that he's rushing to give me money. How can I not fulfill his wish? When they were some distance away from the stall, Hui grinned and laughed at Phone. Hey, someone really gives me a pillow when I'm sleepy. I was just complaining that I don't have money. Do you two want to buy anything? Come, I'll buy everything. Bye. Yin Nuashing and the little girl. This guy just cheated someone of 5 million in a short time. That person just now was also someone with special power. The little girl said to the two, You probably also recognized the spiritual wood. Maybe you recognized the wisp of spiritual energy in the spiritual wood. It's just like the snatching of resources in your world. I think it should be similar. Snatching of resources. Yin Nuashing and Hui looked at each other. This happened many, many years ago. They had no recollection of it. It seems that the world with a low energy level also has things that contain abundant energy. It's not all dried up like what we thought in the past. Hui thought of the stone he encountered this morning and the spiritual wood he encountered now. It seemed to be the same, and he was sure that this was definitely not an exception. There should be many things with energy lurking in every corner of the world, such as in front of him. Foam. There's another fun thing over there. Let's go and take a look. Hui shouted like he was having a seizure. He threw the box into Feng's hands and rushed to the stall in front of him. The two of them were speechless. This guy could really have fun all the time. Wood carving, paper carving, clay sculpture, flower lantern, colored glaze, tang tricolor, embroidery, paper cutting. Foam. Do you want to hang these concentric knots in your spiritual world for decoration? And these lanterns, flower lanterns, and so on. About 10 minutes later, Hui was holding a lot of things in his hands. He suddenly looked at Foam and laughed. Yin Nuashing was so excited that her whole body trembled. Okay. The little angel took the first step and used a light to roll most of the things in Huey's hands into the spiritual world. Shuang Shuang, come and help decorate. Yin Nuashing stared at Hui with a gloomy face. What have you done? These new gadgets had also triggered an indescribable switch in the two girls inside. Once they knew how these gadgets were made, they would make 10 million copies of them in their spiritual worlds in a matter of minutes, and then display them all over the mountains and rivers. Hui scratched his head and laughed dryly. Just as he was about to say something, his eyes caught something in front of him. His expression froze. Oh, the aura of something good. Yin Nuashing just came back to her senses when a certain guardian turned into a wisp of smoke and slipped away. He was so stifled that his face turned red. He hurriedly took the little girl and followed. Hui looked at the stall for a while and casually picked up a dark red stone at the corner of the table. Boss, how much is this thing? The stall owner reached out and picked his ear. He looked up at Hui and said indifferently, 80,000, non-negotiable. Hui raised his eyebrows. Just as he was about to take out the money, a loud shout suddenly came from the side, making his hand freeze. 800,000, I want this thing. Hui and Yin Nuashing seemed to have heard the voice before. They turned their heads curiously. 10 meters away, a young man in a black suit was walking quickly with his hands behind his back. There were two bodyguards beside him. The shout just now attracted a lot of attention, but when they saw that it was not directed at them, they pretended that nothing had happened. Why is it you again? When the young man walked closer and saw Hui, he was stunned. He casually crossed his arms. Tell me, how much are you going to pay this time? I want that thing. The little girl whispered to Yin Nuashing, look, he seems to be able to feel the Reiki wrapped around that stone. He probably cultivated it. Yin Nuashing nodded. Hui blinked and was about to say something when the young man suddenly clapped his hands and said, Kid, how about this? I think you seem to know something. How about this? You come with me tonight. If you buy something valuable, 1/10 of the price will be your reward tonight. How about it? It saves me the trouble of running around. It's tiring. Hui shook his head and put down the stone in his hand. We just came out to relax and have fun. We don't have any other plans. Please find someone else. The young man frowned. The person in front of him seemed to be very accurate in judging things. He had walked 7 or 8 streets and touched a lot of things in one night, but he had also misjudged many things. Other than buying those small trinkets, the person in front of him had only bought 2 items with Reiki in his hands. Moreover, he had just seen that dark red stone, and there was nothing special about it. He didn't know why, but when he looked back, the stone had manifested Reiki in his hands. This person definitely had something extraordinary about him. It would be good if he could be of use to him, but if not, he didn't mind destroying it. He thought for a while and continued, 1/2. I'll arrange a position for you in the Zhao family. You can name your salary. How about that? Sigh, so troublesome. We just came out to have fun. Can you not talk about work? Hui felt a headache when he heard these things. When it came to these things, his mind immediately thought of the time at the Void front line. That was really... His face was full of pain. He waved his hand vigorously. No, no, no. Don't waste your effort. I'm a man you'll never get. Phone. Let's go. Finish shopping? Then let's go. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand, and the three of them immediately rushed in the direction of the door. However, before they could run far, the two bodyguards who looked like bulls blocked their way and stopped them. Is there a need to do this? There's no need to cause so much trouble when we're just shopping, right? We're just out to have fun. Hui spread his hands and looked at the young man who walked over unhurriedly behind him. He then looked at Feng, who stretched out his hands and was ready to beat someone up. Hui smiled bitterly and held the ladder down. There's no need to do this. Do you want to make big news? Haha, it's not up to you not to choose. The conditions I just stated can still be adjusted. This is my final concession. Don't be ungrateful. The young man walked forward with a cold smile and looked at Yin Nuoxing and the little girl. If you act rashly, I can't guarantee that these two little girls won't experience something. Blue veins popped out on Yin Nuoxing's forehead. We saw that his face was as black as the void. He subconsciously rubbed his hands together, and energy was brewing in his body, ready to set off fireworks. He almost spat out his tongue and pressed down hard. Phone, calm down. Don't be impulsive. That's origin energy. Are you planning to sink this void? The little girl was so anxious that she wanted to curse. This guy, don't mess around with us. Provoking the most dangerous bomb in the Holy Yuan realm is going to cost us our lives. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to make a scene and was about to send them to heaven with a big fight, a slightly hoarse voice rang out from the small house next to them, calming them down. Little kid from a Zhao family. These three people are our distinguished guests. For my sake, how about you let this matter go? The voice rang out from the house. When they reacted again, an old man in a black tang suit appeared in front of them. He knocked on his old waist and cupped his hands respectfully to Yin Nuoxing and the other two. Please be magnanimous. There are many innocent people here. Ah, it's you. Hui scratched his head. Why are you here? Elder Zheng pointed to the small house next to them. My young mistress was talking with a guest here. She accidentally saw that you were arguing, so she wanted to come out and resolve it for you. The young man from the Zhao family had just seen that Zheng Xiao and Elder Zheng, who were absolute masters in Jiang City, were so polite to that person. Their tone even vaguely made him look inferior. He was a little shocked and couldn't help but re-examine Hui and the other two. He couldn't see anything wrong at all, except for their extraordinary temperament. He couldn't see anything special. However, compared to the first time he saw them, why did he feel that their appearance was a little blurry? Was his myopia getting worse? However, if the Zhou family wanted to intervene, could it be that these three people were related to the Zhou family? Since Elder Zheng has said so, then let's drop this matter. The young man thought for a while and nodded slightly to Hui. I was rash today. I still have some things to deal with. I'll come to apologize another day. He waved his hand, and the two bodyguards who were blocking the way quickly returned to his side and left with the others. Hui watched the young man leave and scratched his head. What a strange guy. Hey, it seems that I have to find some fun to restore my mood. Chapter 1754. There were a lot of people who looked for trouble when they had nothing to do, and even more people who continued to look for trouble when they had something to do. It really existed in every world. For example, if the young man from the Zhao family had not come out to resolve the matter, a fight would have already broken out. If the young man's opponent was an ordinary person, the ordinary person would have been beaten to death. If the young man's opponent was an equal, they might still be outside slapping each other. If the young man was stronger, it would be the young man's turn to be defeated or run away. And if it was Maple who had made the move just now, there might have been a hole here. Well, he was really used to it. Even so, he still felt that the mortal world was actually quite fun. Putting aside those annoying things, all the beautiful sceneries, all the traces created by life, and all the traces pieced together by nature were quite beautiful. putting aside the destruction and pollution that existed in the dark. In short, mortals and people with predestined lifespans, the excessively short traces of life forced their life instincts to leave traces of themselves in the world, not for individuals, but for the entire race. It was the life instinct of a race. Those traces were the fun that he saw. As for the meaning and whatnot, it was meaningless. The things mortals cared about, the things they did, and the things they left behind would only be judged as interesting or boring for immortal and eternal beings like them. This was very easy to explain. Using the simplest example, the incomparably precious things on this planet. For example, the jade that had been stolen after blowing up a street was just a broken stone to them. The energy content was not even as much as a sneeze from him. That was what it meant. Just like how he desperately urged Maple to take a good rest for a while, he was also looking for a reason for himself to take a break. The most important reason was the first one. Maple was already at his limit. Maple himself did not know, but they needed to know. They could only find a reason, an excuse, to force the guy who risked his life to take a break from the endless vortex of destruction. They just came out to have fun. It did not matter how or where they went. It did not matter if they met people on the road, or if it was just the three of them traveling. It was not a big problem. They just had fun. It was fine as long as he didn't blow up other people's houses. Elder Zheng watched as the three of them stared blankly in the direction of the little boy from the Zhao family. He didn't know why they were in a daze. After a while, he said, "Why don't the three of you come in so that we can sincerely apologize to you?" Apologize? Hui snapped out of his daze. Apologize for what? This morning, we didn't manage our subordinates well and attack you guys by mistake. Miss feels bad and has been looking for you. Elder Zheng tapped his old waist and raised his head to look at Huey's calm eyes. He said softly, "Although the attack was just a joke to you, if we don't do anything, it's a problem of attitude." "Hey, you talking about that? We don't really care about it." Hui laughed dryly and waved his hand. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. He leaned close to Maple's ear and said a few words with a smirk. Maple had been in a state of indifference since he came to this world. He was a little bored. It was only at this moment that his eyes moved slightly. "Then let's go in." Elder Zheng smiled and walked in front of them to welcome them. "Please." The hut in front of them was no different from the surrounding huts. However, the scene behind the door was different from some of the other huts that had their doors open but were just for decoration. The interior was a different world. The antique decor and the warm yellow lighting made Yin Nuashing and Hui feel a little familiar. Although the overall style was still very different from the buildings in the realm of the gods, at least they could see the similarities. There were screens on the left and right sides of the room. The entire room was about 3 to 4 meters wide, and it was not considered big. There was only one table and 4 or 5 chairs inside. The girl in blue, whom he had seen from afar today, was also sitting among them. Other than her, there were 2 other middle-aged people sitting across the table. One of them was wearing a yellow Taoist robe, and the other was wearing a simple but seemingly exquisite white robe. However, Yin Nuashing and the others did not understand the meaning of the patterns on the edges for the time being, but it did not prevent them from slightly paying attention, because they also felt that there was a faint familiar style, weak a little bit. "Oh, I didn't expect to see this kind of clothes here." Hui curiously moved closer to the middle-aged man in the white robe and looked at him carefully for a while. The people in the hut naturally looked at them. The 2 men in the yellow robe and the white robe were also stunned when they saw the appearance and temperament of the 3 people, especially when they heard Huey's thoughtful words. The latter could not help but stand up and cupped his hands. "Your Excellency, you recognize this outfit. Are you also from the Jade Pavilion?" "Oh, I don't know." Hui waved his hand. "It's just that your clothes remind me of our distant hometown. It's a little similar." When he mentioned his hometown, his emotions were neither vicissitudes of life, sentimentality, nor worry, sadness, or longing. Instead, it was a sense of helplessness and tiredness that were engraved in his bones. There was also a faint hatred. This complicated expression stunned the 3 people in the hut. The difficulty of this expression might be at least 100 levels. When mixed together, it became a picture scroll that told an endless story. It was as if they could see the countless stories hidden behind his expression. The girl in blue rolled her eyes and picked up 2 wine glasses from the table. She handed one of them to Yun Nuoxing and said apologetically, "Please allow me to apologize for what happened this morning. I didn't manage my subordinates well. This glass of wine is my apology to you. Please help yourself." When Yun Nuoxing took the wine glass, she was still a little stunned. When she saw that she raised her head and drank the wine in one gulp, she thought about it and patted Huey's shoulder. The latter shook his head and smiled. "What's wrong, Feng?" "Ugh." As soon as Hui opened his mouth, the wine glass was stuffed into his mouth. He rolled his eyes hard. After swallowing it, he muttered, "Can't you let me do it myself?" When the 2 middle-aged men saw this scene, their expressions were a little strange. When they all sat down, the middle-aged man in the yellow robe said to the girl in blue, "Miss Zhou, who are these 3 people?" The girl in blue tilted her head and looked at Yun Nuoxing and the others. She chuckled. "I met them this morning. It was because of their help that we recovered the Flame Dragon Stone." "Oh, so that stone is called the Flame Dragon Stone." Hui touched his chin in realization. Then he tilted his head and said, "That's not right. How did you know that we did it? Have you been watching from behind?" He tilted his head and saw the girl's slightly sly expression. He couldn't help but pat his forehead. "Well, you tricked me. I didn't have any tricks up my sleeve when I went out." Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but sit up a little straighter. She whispered to the little girl in a way that the whole room could hear. "You make it sound like someone is usually scheming. Usually, they don't even use their brains." The girl in blue smiled. 3 unknown people who seemed to be very powerful but didn't want to show their faces. Coincidentally, they appeared at that place at that time. She thought for a bit and connected these 2 things together. The man in the yellow robe coughed lightly to get her attention. He said to Yun Nuoxing and the others softly, "Please allow me to express my gratitude later." Then he turned to the 2 middle-aged men and took out a square plate and placed it on the table. "Masters, please." The square wooden plate was engraved with the yin and yang and the 8 trigrams. There seemed to be a mysterious aura circulating within it. However, it seemed that it didn't meet the requirements to retain this mysterious aura. It only left a shallow mark and quickly disappeared. "Phone this thing," Hui whispered in his soul. "This world also has a Tai Chi. It seems that something is engraved in it. There's a weak energy. The realm of the gods doesn't have deep research on this kind of thing. I don't know what this world is like." The aura of time wasn't very long. The things left inside had been washed away by time and were almost useless. Unfortunately, he was still interested in the thing made up of circles and horizontal bars. However, since this world had such a thing, there should be more of it, right? Yin Nuoxing nodded slightly and didn't say anything. She looked at the 2 middle-aged men. The man in the yellow robe took the 8 trigrams plate first. He looked at it carefully for a while and then passed it to the other man. After they finished looking at it and put it back, the girl in blue said, "Masters, what do you think? This is indeed a magic tool. There are still weak traces of Tao left inside. However, these traces of Tao can't be left in this era. It's very likely that it's an ancient relic." The man in the yellow robe stroked his chin. "There should be a small defensive formation engraved inside. It can protect you if you keep it with you." The man in the white robe waved his hand. "But why does it look like it can be used to calm the mind, relieve fatigue, and nourish the meridians? Look at the traces of Tao engraved here. It's obviously different from the protective formation you mentioned. According to what you said, you know how to use this thing." The man in the yellow robe looked at him and couldn't help but laugh. "This? I don't know. Do you know?" The man in the white robe glared at him. "If you have the guts, show us what you can do." The man in the yellow robe's cheek twitched. He snorted and took the 8 trigrams plate. "Why wouldn't I dare?" He looked at the yin and yang and the 8 trigrams on the plate and frowned slightly. He muttered a Taoist name in a low voice. His other hand formed a seal, and he slowly closed his eyes. The chin position of the 8 trigrams in his hand lit up slightly. The other 2 positions connected to it gradually lit up as well. The white-robed man was also shocked when he saw this. Could it be that this guy can really activate this ancient artifact? Yin Nuashing and Hui were originally watching calmly. They saw that the man continued to activate the object. Before the DUI and Sun positions completely lit up, a chaotic aura suddenly came out from the plate. The two of them were shocked and quickly intervened. "Stop!" The sudden shout interrupted the man in the yellow robes chanting. He opened his eyes in horror. The 8 trigrams plate in his hand became unstable for some reason. It flickered and made him feel a shocking attack. He broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't even have time to throw it away. At this moment, a colorful shadow suddenly flashed in front of his eyes, and his hands suddenly felt empty. When they turned around in shock, Yin Nuashing was pressing down on the 8 trigrams plate with his hands together, and when he let go, it had already quieted down. When the two of them saw this, they both let out a long sigh of relief, and cold sweat flowed down their backs. When the 8 trigrams plate went berserk just now, it really gave them a fright. "You old thing, you almost killed yourself by messing around." The man in the white robe scolded. The man in the yellow robe's face turned red. However, he was indeed careless and made a mess just now. At this moment, he couldn't talk back. He could only swallow his anger. "What's going on? This thing is incomplete. It's missing a piece in the east and a piece in the west. It almost exploded when I forcibly activated it." Yun Nuashing shook the 8 trigrams plate in her hand and walked to her seat. She put it on the table. The original body should be an attack instrument. As for the effects you mentioned, they should be the kind that comes with it and are not particularly important. Don't move it casually. Something bad will happen. The man in the yellow robe laughed dryly and wiped his sweat. He quickly got up and cupped his hands to Yun Nuashing. "Thank you for saving me. I didn't expect you to be a powerhouse of the Four Seas realm." Puff! The man in the white robe heard this and spat out a mouthful of tea. His face was full of horror and astonishment. Four seas. We scratch his head. What's the Four Seas realm? The few people in the room were stunned. They couldn't help but look at Hui. However, they saw that he and the 2 people beside him were a little stunned and didn't seem to be joking. They were a little confused. Logically speaking, a powerhouse of this realm shouldn't be unaware of the realm, right? Yin Nuashing and Hui both smiled bitterly in their hearts. They had only been here for a day. They only understood the things that could be written and recorded on the surface. They really didn't find a way to get in touch with and understand these things that were similar to the things in the dark. Hui yawned and said lazily, "You don't have to be so surprised if you don't know about this. You don't pay attention to the outside world and only want to sleep." It's referring to him. Yin Nuashing. Although she still didn't understand what was going on with these 3 people, they were 3 very strange powerhouses. Well, the girl in blue coughed softly and explained to Yin Nuashing and the other 2 in a low voice, "Master, based on the speed of your attack just now, you should belong to the Four Seas realm, which is the 3rd major realm of cultivation. Corresponding to the early stage, there are the 4 realms of the human realm, the Earth realm, and then the Four Seas. The Earth realm and the Four Seas realm are also divided into small success, large success, pinnacle, and downering. The Four Seas realm is already a top-notch powerhouse in the world today. As for the 2 realms above, Yin Nuashing tilted her head. No one in this era can reach those 2 realms. It's time and luck." Elder Zheng stroked the teacup lightly and let out a long breath. Those 2 realms only exist in legends. They are called the Heaven Realm and the Mortal Immortal. Hui counted with his fingers and said, "The 3 realms of sea, land, and air are complete." I see. Everyone, the atmosphere was quite normal just a moment ago, but it suddenly became like they were sitting at the dinner table and discussing whether they would be eating something that swam in the sea, flew in the sky, or ran on the ground. Mountain beasts, cloud swallows, land cattle, sheep, and seafood. The more they talked, the more hungry they became. The girl in blue immediately stood up and bowed to Yun Nuashing. "Master, can you please repair this Dharma artifact? Yin Nuashing once again touched the 8 trigrams plate. His eyes were filled with a colorful luster. He could clearly see the internal structure of the 8 trigrams plate. He placed it in the air between his hands and gently patted it. The yellow-robed middle-aged man and the white-robed man both widened their eyes subconsciously and stared at Yin Nuashing, who was glowing all over. This was a good opportunity to see a powerhouse of the Four Seas realm up close. If they could comprehend something, they could at least reduce their cultivation in the future. Here, it's done. The 2 middle-aged men. So fast. It's only been 2 seconds. After all, it's just a small Dharma artifact. Yin Nuashing placed it on the table in front of the girl in blue. She picked up her teacup and took a sip gracefully. It's not something worth mentioning, but it's also good for defense. By the way, it's just a Dharma artifact's natural defense. Don't think that you're invincible just because you have it in your pocket. It can only block the power of the Earth realm, right? Everyone was speechless. A Dharma artifact that could block the attack of an Earth realm powerhouse was already considered a top-grade Dharma artifact. There weren't many powerhouses of the Four Seas realm in a country, and most of them were in the lower Earth realm. However, other than Elder Zheng, they were still struggling in the Four Seas realm. The yellow-robed middle-aged man stood up and patted his robe. He cupped his hands at the girl in blue and said, "I'm sorry that I couldn't complete Miss Zhou's request. As for the commission fee, I'll return it to you later. I better go back to the mountains and cultivate for a few more years. I'll take my leave now." The white-robed man nodded and hurried out of the room. "Hey, 2 masters." The girl in blue hurriedly stood up to urge them to stay. However, the speed at which the 2 of them left after saying those words was faster than her reaction. When she stood up, they had already disappeared. She couldn't help but hold her forehead. This is troublesome. The last 2 candidates also ran away. This statement that seemed to have a hidden meaning made Yin Nuashing shrink his neck and turn his head to pretend that it don't exist. We suddenly smelled the scent of fun and stood up abruptly. What? What's fun about it? Fun. The girl in blue smiled bitterly. It's kind of fun. Not only is it fun, but it's also related to the Zhou family's reputation. Elder Zheng explained, "In 2 days, there will be a cultivators' assembly. It's not a martial arts competition, but an appreciation of magic artifacts and an auction. The Zhou clan is a big shot in Jiang City, but there are also 2 other clans and other unknown opponents. They are all strong competitors. The 2 original cultivators of the Zhou clan are in closed-door training and won't be able to come out for a while. We have no choice but to seek outside help." Elder Zheng tapped his old waist and sighed. "We've been looking for people for 7 or 8 days, but there are only a few reliable ones. They either sneaked in or are not skilled at all." We looked at him thoughtfully. "You're also a cultivator. Can't you go?" Elder Zheng shook his head. "Cultivators are also subdivided into lower levels. I'm just a pure martial artist. Although I'm in the Earth realm, I can't appreciate magic tools. I'm different from others who are half a step into the Tao seeking immortal cultivation. This is also the minority among cultivators. If martial artists are ordinary people, then half-immortals are people above others. They boast about their special identities and are very arrogant. Although these 2 guys didn't dare to say anything just now, they only did it after you guys came." Yin Nuashing said half-immortals. "So, that's where the name immortal among mortals comes from?" "That's right. Most of the people ranked in the world today are half-immortals, but there are exceptions. For example, the person you guys killed today on the dark roll. Flame is a special power he has. It seems to be called a supernatural ability. There are very few of them in Huaxia. Most of them are from other countries. Their supernatural abilities have a lot of limitations. The starting point is high, and the ending point is about the same." As Elder Zheng spoke, he looked at his miss, who seemed to be thinking about something. He, who had been familiar with her for many years, immediately understood. "By the way, I wonder if the 3 masters are free." When he said this, he laughed bitterly. Even his miss was thinking. After all, they were masters of the Four Seas realm. It was still a question whether they would care about this kind of small matter. This realm as its name suggested, was able to traverse the four seas. They could go anywhere in the world. They were true masters. It was not something small people like them could understand. Perhaps they would not even care about this kind of convention that was similar to going to a temple fair. Is it fun? If it's fun, we'll go. We stood up with a bang and put his hands on his waist. Instead of us going to have fun, why don't we let others take us to have fun? Foam! Let's go. Let's go to that whatever convention. I think it'll be fun. Yin Nuoxing's face twitched violently. She tilted her head and looked at the two girls in blue who were stunned. Will there be many people? If there are many people, nonsense, there will definitely be many people at the convention. Since it's a convention, how can there not be many people? Hui sighed and dragged Feng outside. Let's go. Where's the convention? The convention of cultivators will only be held tomorrow afternoon. The girl in blue laughed bitterly. Oh, Hearing this, the girl in blue and Elder Zheng laughed bitterly. This master of the four seas was an optimist. He was a little heartless. As for the master who was dragged away beside him and did not have much energy, he was the optimist. The girl in blue covered her mouth and laughed softly. May I know where the three of you are staying? We will come to pick you up tomorrow. Yin Nuoxing and the other two looked at each other. Hui laughed dryly and scratched his head. The four seas. The four seas are home. Yin Nuoxing said, simply put, we don't have a place to stay. We were just discussing whether we should drift on the sea for the whole night or find a bench in the park to daydream. How about this? We will come here to find you at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Hui grinned and dragged Yin Nuoxing out. They still had to go to other places to stroll around. I haven't given you any gifts yet. The girl in blue's outstretched hand froze again. She could not help but laugh bitterly and shake her head. Why are all of you in such a hurry? That you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.